Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The storage unit. I work nights at a storage facility outside of town. It's one of those jobs nobody really wants, but the pay is decent and I need the money. Been doing it for about 3 years now. Most nights nothing happens. I sit in the office watching cameras and doing rounds every couple hours. That's it. The facility is huge. We have over 500 units spread across 5 buildings. Each building has 3 floors. The place is like a maze if you don't know your way around. I learned pretty quick which units belong to who. You start to notice patterns. Some people come every week. Others haven't been back in years. There's this one unit that always bothered me. Unit 318 in Building C. The lock on it is different from all the others. It's this old rusty thing that looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. The records show someone's been paying for it since 1987. That's before I was even born. The name on the account is just initials. Jam. That's all. I asked my manager about it once. He told me to mind my own business. Said some customers value their privacy. Fair enough, I guess. But something about that unit just felt wrong. Maybe it was the smell. Even walking past it you could smell something sweet and rotten. Like old fruit mixed with chemicals. One night about 6 months ago I was doing my rounds. It was around 3 a.m. Dead quiet like always. I was walking past Unit 318 when I heard something. It sounded like scratching. Like someone dragging their nails across metal. I stopped and listened. The sound was definitely coming from inside the unit. My first thought was rats. We get them sometimes. But this sounded bigger. And more deliberate. Like someone was trying to get out. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes just listening. Then it stopped. Just like that. Complete silence again. I should have reported it. That's what the manual says. Any unusual activity needs to be logged. But I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid. Probably just the building settling or pipes making noise. Old buildings do that. The next few nights were normal. No weird sounds. No problems. I started to forget about it. Then exactly 1 week later it happened again. Same time. Same sound. This time I had my phone ready. I recorded about 30 seconds of it. The scratching was louder this time. More desperate. I played it for my coworker Dave when he came in for the day shift. He laughed at me. Said I'd been watching too many horror movies. But I could tell he was a little freaked out too. He promised to keep an ear out during his shifts. 2 nights later Dave called in sick. That never happens. Dave hasn't missed a day in 5 years. I tried calling him but he didn't answer. His replacement said Dave had sounded really shaken up on the phone. Wouldn't say why he couldn't come in. That night I decided to check the cameras for Unit 318. We keep footage for 30 days. I went back to the night Dave last worked. Found the timestamp for Building C. What I saw made my blood run cold. At 2:47 a.m. the door to Unit 318 was open. Not forced open. Just open. Like someone had unlocked it from the inside. The camera angle didn't show inside the unit, but I could see a shadow moving around. Then at 2:52 a.m. Dave appears in frame. He's doing his rounds like normal. He stops at Unit 318. Stands there for a moment. Then he goes inside. The footage jumps. When it comes back Dave is running. Full sprint down the hallway. His face is white as a sheet. He doesn't stop running until he's out of the building. The door to Unit 318 is closed again. Locked like nothing happened. I must have watched that footage 20 times. Each time I noticed something new. The way Dave's hands were shaking. The wet stains on his uniform. The fact that he left his flashlight behind. I knew I should quit. Pack up and find another job. But I needed the money. And part of me needed to know what was in that unit. So I kept working. Kept doing my rounds. But I started avoiding Building C. Made excuses. Said the elevator was acting up. Anything to stay away from Unit 318. Then last week everything changed. I got a call from the police. They'd found Dave. He was living in his car about 3 towns over. Hadn't been home since that night. When they asked him what happened he just kept repeating the same thing. She's still in there. She's still in there. The police wanted to search Unit 318. They had a warrant and everything. My manager had no choice but to let them in. I wasn't working that day but I heard about it later. They found old furniture. boxes of moldy clothes, and in the back corner they found a dresser. Inside the dresser were dozens of Polaroid photos, all of the same woman. In every photo she looked exactly the same. Same dress, same pose, same smile. The weird part was the backgrounds. They were all different storage units, taken over decades. The police took everything as evidence, had a hazmat team clean out the unit. The official report said it was just abandoned property, nothing criminal, case closed. But I know that's not true, because I've seen the footage from the night they cleaned it out. At 3:18 a.m. all the cameras in building C cut out. When they come back on, every single storage unit door is open. All of them, except one. Unit 318 is locked tight. Just like always, I gave my 2 weeks notice yesterday. My manager didn't even try to talk me out of it. I think he knows something's wrong too. My last shift is tomorrow night. Part of me wants to just not show up, but I need that final paycheck. Dave still won't talk about what he saw. I visited him last week. He's lost about 30 pounds. Doesn't sleep. Just sits there staring at nothing. Before I left he grabbed my arm. Looked me right in the eyes. "Don't let her out," he said. "Whatever you do, don't let her out." I don't know what he means. I don't want to know. All I know is that Unit 318 is still there. Still locked. Still paid for by JM. And sometimes late at night when I'm doing my rounds I swear I can hear humming coming from inside. An old song I don't recognize. Sweet and sad and terrifying. Tomorrow is my last shift. I'm going to stay in the office, watch the cameras, do my paperwork, and pray that door stays locked. Because I have a feeling if it opens again someone else is going to end up like Dave. Or worse. I'll update if anything happens. Hopefully this is just me being paranoid. But something tells me it's not. Something tells me JM is still in there. Still waiting. Still watching. And she's getting impatient. The substitute teacher. I've been substitute teaching for about 2 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps me busy and I actually like working with kids. Most days are pretty straightforward. Teacher leaves a lesson plan. I follow it. Kids do their work. Everyone goes home happy. But last month I got assigned to a school I'd never been to before. McKinley Elementary on the outskirts of town. The regular third grade teacher had some kind of family emergency. They needed someone to cover her class for at least a week, maybe 2. The principal, Mrs. Chen, seemed nice enough when I checked in that first morning. But I noticed she kept glancing at her watch while we talked, like she was anxious about something. She walked me to room 12 and handed me the keys. "The lesson plans are on the desk," she said. "If you need anything, I'll be in my office." Then she left. Practically ran out of there. The classroom looked normal at first glance. Colorful posters on the walls. Little desks in neat rows. Cubby holes with the kids' names on them. But something felt off. Maybe it was how quiet it was. Even before school starts there's usually some noise. Janitors working. Other teachers preparing. But that hallway was dead silent. I found the lesson plans right where Mrs. Chen said they'd be. They were detailed. Almost too detailed. Every minute of the day was planned out. Even bathroom breaks had specific times listed. At the bottom of each page was a note written in red ink. "Do not deviate from the schedule." Very important. The kids started arriving around 8:15. They were quiet. Too quiet for third graders. They walked in single file and went straight to their seats. No talking. No laughing. Just sat there with their hands folded staring at me. "Good morning, class," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm Mr. Barnes. I'll be your teacher while Mrs. Anderson is away." 22 pairs of eyes just stared at me. Nobody smiled. Nobody waved. Nothing. I checked the lesson plan. 8:30 to 9 o'clock was silent reading time. Seemed like a long time for 8-year-olds to read quietly, but okay. I told them to take out their books. They all moved at exactly the same time. Same motion. Same speed. Like they'd rehearsed it. For 30 minutes nobody made a sound. Not a cough. Not a sniffle. Not even a page turning. I sat at the desk pretending to read too, but really I was watching them. They weren't reading. They were just staring at their books. Not moving their eyes. Not turning pages. Just staring. At exactly 9 o'clock they all closed their books. Again, perfect synchronization. I checked the plan. Math time. I started writing problems on the board. Easy stuff. Addition and subtraction. When I turned around every kid had their pencil in their hand. All holding them the exact same way. Who wants to solve the first problem? I asked. Nobody raised their hand. They just kept staring. Finally, a girl in the front row stood up. She walked to the board, took the chalk and solved the problem, then walked back to her seat. No expression on her face the whole time. This went on all morning. Kids moving like robots, following the schedule to the second. No talking unless directly asked a question. Even then they gave the shortest possible answer. Lunch was at exactly 11:30. The kids lined up without being told. Walked to the cafeteria in perfect formation. I followed them, feeling more and more uneasy. In the cafeteria they sat at one long table, all on the same side, all facing the same direction. They ate in complete silence. I tried sitting with them, tried making conversation, asked about their favorite subjects, their hobbies. Nothing. They just chewed their food and stared straight ahead. A few other teachers walked by, but none of them looked at us. It was like we were invisible. After lunch things got worse. The lesson plan said special activity 12:30 to 1 o'clock. But there were no details, no materials listed, nothing. I asked the kids what special activity meant. They all turned their heads to look at me. Exactly the same angle, exactly the same blank expression. "We wait," said a boy in the back row. "Wait for what?" I asked. "For her to come back," he said. "Oh, Mrs. Anderson?" The kids didn't answer. They just turned back to face forward, hands folded, eyes straight ahead, waiting. I sat there for 30 minutes watching them. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. I counted. These kids were going 45 seconds or more without blinking. That's not normal. Nothing about this was normal. At exactly 1 o'clock they all stood up, walked back to their desks, took out their science books, like nothing had happened. I was sweating. My hands were shaking, but I kept teaching, following that lesson plan like my life depended on it. The day finally ended at 3 o'clock. The kids packed up and left just as quietly as they'd arrived. I stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the next day. That's when I found it. In the bottom drawer of the desk, a stack of papers, all written by Mrs. Anderson. They were observation notes about the kids, but not normal teacher observations. These were different. Things like, Sarah hasn't eaten in 3 days but shows no signs of hunger. Or Michael's temperature registered at 94 degrees during the health screening. And strangest of all, they're learning to mimic us better. Getting harder to tell. I took the papers to Mrs. Chen, showed her what I'd found. She went pale, told me I shouldn't have looked in that drawer, that some things were better left alone. When I pressed her for answers, she just shook her head. "Please," she said, "just follow the lesson plans. Don't ask questions. It's safer that way." I went back the next day. I don't know why. Maybe I needed the money. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I'm just stupid. The kids were exactly the same. Same silence. Same synchronized movements. Same blank stares. But now I was looking closer, noticing things I'd missed before. Their skin was too pale, like they'd never seen sunlight. Their eyes never showed emotion, not even when I told a joke or dropped a book on purpose. They didn't react to temperature either. The room was freezing, but none of them shivered. When I opened the windows to let in warm air, they didn't seem to notice. On the third day I broke the schedule. I couldn't help it. During this special activity time I stood up and said we were going outside for recess. The kids didn't move, just kept staring forward. Then slowly, one by one, they turned to look at me. And for the first time I saw something in their eyes. Fear. The storage unit. I worked nights at a storage facility outside of town. It's one of those jobs nobody really wants, but the pay is decent and I need the money. Been doing it for about 3 years now. Most nights nothing happens. I sit in the office watching cameras and doing rounds every couple hours. That's it. The facility is huge. We have over 500 units spread across 5 buildings. Each building has 3 floors. The place is like a maze if you don't know your way around. I learned pretty quick which units belong to who. You start to notice patterns. Some people come every week. Others haven't been back in years. There's this one unit that always bothered me. Unit 318 in Building C. The lock on it is different from all the others. It's this old rusty thing that looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. The records show someone's been paying for it since 1987. That's before I was even born. The name on the account is just initials. Jam. That's all. I asked my manager about it once. He told me to mind my own business. Said some customers value their privacy. Fair enough, I guess. But something about that unit just felt wrong. Maybe it was the smell. Even walking past it, you could smell something sweet and rotten, like old fruit mixed with chemicals. One night about 6 months ago, I was doing my rounds. It was around 3 a.m. Dead quiet like always. I was walking past Unit 318 when I heard something. It sounded like scratching, like someone dragging their nails across metal. I stopped and listened. The sound was definitely coming from inside the unit. My first thought was rats. We get them sometimes. But this sounded bigger and more deliberate, like someone was trying to get out. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes just listening. Then it stopped, just like that. Complete silence again. I should have reported it. That's what the manual says. Any unusual activity needs to be logged. But I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid. Probably just the building settling or pipes making noise. Old buildings do that. The next few nights were normal. No weird sounds, no problems. I started to forget about it. Then exactly 1 week later it happened again. Same time, same sound. This time I had my phone ready. I recorded about 30 seconds of it. The scratching was louder this time, more desperate. I played it for my coworker Dave when he came in for the day shift. He laughed at me, said I'd been watching too many horror movies, but I could tell he was a little freaked out too. He promised to keep an ear out during his shifts. 2 nights later Dave called in sick. That never happens. Dave hasn't missed a day in 5 years. I tried calling him but he didn't answer. His replacement said Dave had sounded really shaken up on the phone. Wouldn't say why he couldn't come in. That night I decided to check the cameras for Unit 318. We keep footage for 30 days. I went back to the night Dave last worked. Found the timestamp for Building C. What I saw made my blood run cold. At 2:47 a.m. the door to Unit 318 was open. Not forced open, just open, like someone had unlocked it from the inside. The camera angle didn't show inside the unit, but I could see a shadow moving around. Then at 2:52 a.m. Dave appears in frame. He's doing his rounds like normal. He stops at Unit 318, stands there for a moment. Then he goes inside. The footage jumps. When it comes back, Dave is running. Full sprint down the hallway. His face is white as a sheet. He doesn't stop running until he's out of the building. The door to Unit 318 is closed again, locked like nothing happened. I must have watched that footage 20 times. Each time I noticed something new. The way Dave's hands were shaking, the wet stains on his uniform, the fact that he left his flashlight behind. I knew I should quit, pack up and find another job. But I needed the money, and part of me needed to know what was in that unit. So I kept working, kept doing my rounds. But I started avoiding Building C, made excuses, said the elevator was acting up. Anything to stay away from Unit 318. Then last week everything changed. I got a call from the police. They'd found Dave. He was living in his car about 3 towns over. Hadn't been home since that night. When they asked him what happened, he just kept repeating the same thing. She's still in there. She's still in there. The police wanted to search Unit 318. They had a warrant and everything. My manager had no choice but to let them in. I wasn't working that day, but I heard about it later. They found old furniture, boxes of moldy clothes, and in the back corner they found a dresser. Inside the dresser were dozens of Polaroid photos, all of the same woman. In every photo she looked exactly the same. Same dress, same pose, same smile. The weird part was the backgrounds. They were all different storage units, taken over decades. The police took everything as evidence. Had a hazmat team clean out the unit. The official report said it was just abandoned property. Nothing criminal. Case closed. But I know that's not true, because I've seen the footage from the night they cleaned it out. At 3:18 a.m. all the cameras in Building C cut out. When they come back on, every single storage unit door is open. All of them, except one. Unit 318 is locked tight. Just like always. I gave my 2 weeks notice yesterday. My manager didn't even try to talk me out of it. I think he knows something's wrong too. My last shift is tomorrow night. Part of me wants to just not show up. But I need that final paycheck. Dave still won't talk about what he saw. I visited him last week. He's lost about 30 pounds. Doesn't sleep. Just sits there staring at nothing. Before I left he grabbed my arm. Looked me right in the eyes. "Don't let her out," he said. "Whatever you do, don't let her out." I don't know what he means. I don't want to know. All I know is that Unit 318 is still there. Still locked. Still paid for by JM. And sometimes late at night when I'm doing my rounds, I swear I can hear humming coming from inside. An old song I don't recognize. Sweet and sad and terrifying. Tomorrow is my last shift. I'm going to stay in the office, watch the cameras, do my paperwork, and pray that door stays locked. Because I have a feeling if it opens again, someone else is going to end up like Dave. Or worse. I'll update if anything happens. Hopefully this is just me being paranoid. But something tells me it's not. Something tells me JM is still in there. Still waiting. Still watching. And she's getting impatient. The substitute teacher. I've been substitute teaching for about 2 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps me busy and I actually like working with kids. Most days are pretty straightforward. Teacher leaves a lesson plan. I follow it. Kids do their work. Everyone goes home happy. But last month I got assigned to a school I'd never been to before. McKinley Elementary on the outskirts of town. The regular third grade teacher had some kind of family emergency. They needed someone to cover her class for at least a week, maybe 2. The principal, Mrs. Chen, seemed nice enough when I checked in that first morning. But I noticed she kept glancing at her watch while we talked, like she was anxious about something. She walked me to room 12 and handed me the keys. The lesson plans are on the desk, she said. If you need anything, I'll be in my office. Then she left. Practically ran out of there. The classroom looked normal at first glance. Colorful posters on the walls. Little desks in neat rows. Cubby holes with the kids' names on them. But something felt off. Maybe it was how quiet it was. Even before school starts, there's usually some noise. Janitors working. Other teachers preparing. But that hallway was dead silent. I found the lesson plans right where Mrs. Chen said they'd be. They were detailed. Almost too detailed. Every minute of the day was planned out. Even bathroom breaks had specific times listed. At the bottom of each page was a note written in red ink. Do not deviate from the schedule. Very important. The kids started arriving around 8:15. They were quiet. Too quiet for third graders. They walked in single file and went straight to their seats. No talking. No laughing. Just sat there with their hands folded staring at me. Good morning, class, I said, trying to sound cheerful. I'm Mr. Barnes. I'll be your teacher while Mrs. Anderson is away. 22 pairs of eyes just stared at me. Nobody smiled. Nobody waved. Nothing. I checked the lesson plan. 8:30 to 9 o'clock was silent reading time. Seemed like a long time for 8-year-olds to read quietly, but okay. I told them to take out their books. They all moved at exactly the same time. Same motion. Same speed. Like they'd rehearsed it. For 30 minutes nobody made a sound. Not a cough. Not a sniffle. Not even a page turning. I sat at the desk pretending to read too, but really I was watching them. They weren't reading. They were just staring at their books. Not moving their eyes. Not turning pages. Just staring. At exactly 9 o'clock they all closed their books. Again, perfect synchronization. I checked the plan. Math time. I started writing problems on the board. Easy stuff. Addition and subtraction. When I turned around, every kid had their pencil in their hand. All holding them the exact same way. Who wants to solve the first problem? I asked. Nobody raised their hand. They just kept staring. Finally, a girl in the front row stood up. She walked to the board, took the chalk and solved the problem. Then walked back to her seat. No expression on her face the whole time. This went on all morning. Kids moving like robots. Following the schedule to the second. No talking unless directly asked a question. Even then they gave the shortest possible answer. Lunch was at exactly 11:30. The kids lined up without being told. Walked to the cafeteria in perfect formation. I followed them, feeling more and more uneasy. In the cafeteria they sat at one long table. All on the same side. All facing the same direction. They ate in complete silence. I tried sitting with them. Tried making conversation. Asked about their favorite subjects. Their hobbies. Nothing. They just chewed their food and stared straight ahead. A few other teachers walked by, but none of them looked at us. It was like we were invisible. After lunch things got worse. The lesson plan said, special activity 12:30 to 1 o'clock. But there were no details. No materials listed. Nothing. I asked the kids what special activity meant. They all turned their heads to look at me. Exactly the same angle. Exactly the same blank expression. We wait. said a boy in the back row. Wait for what? I asked. For her to come back, he said. Oh, Mrs. Anderson? The kids didn't answer. They just turned back to face forward. Hands folded. Eyes straight ahead. Waiting. I sat there for 30 minutes watching them. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. I counted. These kids were going 45 seconds or more without blinking. That's not normal. Nothing about this was normal. At exactly 1 o'clock they all stood up, walked back to their desks, took out their science books, like nothing had happened. I was sweating. My hands were shaking, but I kept teaching, following that lesson plan like my life depended on it. The day finally ended at 3 o'clock. The kids packed up and left just as quietly as they'd arrived. I stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the next day. That's when I found it. In the bottom drawer of the desk, a stack of papers, all written by Mrs. Anderson. They were observation notes about the kids, but not normal teacher observations. These were different. Things like, Sarah hasn't eaten in 3 days but shows no signs of hunger. Or Michael's temperature registered at 94 degrees during the health screening. And strangest of all, they're learning to mimic us better. Getting harder to tell. I took the papers to Mrs. Chen, showed her what I'd found. She went pale, told me I shouldn't have looked in that drawer, that some things were better left alone. When I pressed her for answers, she just shook her head. Please, she said, just follow the lesson plans. Don't ask questions. It's safer that way. I went back the next day. I don't know why. Maybe I needed the money. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I'm just stupid. The kids were exactly the same. Same silence. Same synchronized movements. Same blank stares. But now I was looking closer, noticing things I'd missed before. Their skin was too pale, like they'd never seen sunlight. Their eyes never showed emotion, not even when I told a joke or dropped a book on purpose. They didn't react to temperature either. The room was freezing, but none of them shivered. When I opened the windows to let in warm air, they didn't seem to notice. On the third day, I broke the schedule. I couldn't help it. During this special activity time, I stood up and said we were going outside for recess. The kids didn't move, just kept staring forward. Then slowly, one by one, they turned to look at me. And for the first time, I saw something in their eyes. Fear. We can't go outside, whispered the girl in the front row. Why not? I asked. She'll see us, she said. She'll know we left. Who will see you? The girl started crying. But no tears came out. Just the motion of crying. The sound. But her eyes stayed dry. The other kids started doing it too. All fake crying. All perfectly synchronized. I sat back down. Told them it was okay. We'd stay inside. Wait like we were supposed to. Slowly they stopped crying. Went back to staring. And we sat there in silence until 1 o'clock. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about those kids. About Mrs. Anderson's notes. About what it all meant. I did some research. Looked up the school's history. Found something that made my blood run cold. In 1987 there had been an incident at McKinley Elementary. A gas leak in the basement. 22 third grade students and their teacher had been trapped in room 12. By the time help arrived it was too late. They'd all died. The room had been sealed for years after that. Only recently reopened. I called in sick the next day. And the day after that. Eventually Mrs. Chen stopped calling. They found another substitute. Someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone who would follow the lesson plans. But I still think about those kids. Still wonder what they really were. Ghosts? Something else? And I wonder about Mrs. Anderson. Where did she go? What did she know? Why did she leave those notes for someone to find? Last week I drove past McKinley Elementary. It was after school hours. The parking lot was empty. But I could see room 12 from the street. The lights were on. And I swear I could see them in there. 22 little shapes sitting at their desks. Hands folded. Staring straight ahead. Waiting. I don't substitute teach anymore. Found a different job. Something normal. Something safe. But sometimes I have nightmares. Dreams where I'm back in that classroom. Following the lesson plan. And the kids are staring at me. Not blinking. Not breathing. Just waiting for their real teacher to come back. I hope she never does. The night shift janitor. I clean office buildings for a living. Been doing it for almost 7 years now. It's quiet work which suits me fine. I'm not much of a people person. Rather work alone with my headphones on, just getting things done. Last year I got assigned to a new building downtown. One of those big corporate towers. 40 floors of offices and conference rooms. My shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The building was always empty by the time I got there. Just me, the security guard, and thousands of empty desks. The first few weeks were fine. I had a routine. Start at the top floor and work my way down. Vacuum the carpets, empty the trash, clean the bathrooms, wipe down the break room. Same thing every night. It was actually kind of peaceful. The security guard was this older guy named Frank. Nice enough, but didn't talk much. He'd sit at his desk in the lobby reading newspapers or doing crossword puzzles. Sometimes I'd stop and chat during my break. He'd been working there for 20 years. Knew everything about the building. One night I asked him if anything weird ever happened. Just making conversation. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. Just do your job, he said. Don't go looking for trouble. I thought that was a strange answer but didn't push it. Frank was old school. Probably didn't believe in ghosts or any of that stuff. But his warning stuck with me. Made me wonder what kind of trouble he was talking about. Everything was normal until I got to the 27th floor. That's where things started getting weird. The first time I noticed it, I was vacuuming one of the corner offices. Big fancy room with a great view of the city. I was almost done when I felt someone watching me. You know that feeling? Like eyes on the back of your neck. I turned around but nobody was there. Just empty cubicles and dark offices. I went back to vacuuming but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. I finished that office and moved on to the next one. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Every room on that floor felt wrong somehow. Like the air was heavier, colder. Even with all the lights on, it felt dark. The next night I mentioned it to Frank. Told him the 27th floor gave me the creeps. He put down his newspaper and looked at me. Really looked at me. Stay off 27 after 3 a.m., he said. Trust me on this. Why? I asked. What happens after 3 a.m.? He went back to his newspaper. Wouldn't say another word. Of course, that just made me more curious. I'm not usually the type to go looking for scary stuff, but something about his warning bothered me. Why 3 a.m. specifically? What was special about that time? For the next week I made sure to finish the 27th floor before 3, just to be safe. But I paid attention. Looked for anything unusual. Everything seemed normal. Just empty offices and quiet hallways. Then one night I got behind schedule. Some idiot had spilled coffee all over the 35th floor break room. Took me an extra hour to clean up. By the time I got to 27, it was already 2:45 a.m. I thought about skipping it, coming back the next night. But my supervisor was a real hard-ass. If I missed a floor, he'd know. So I grabbed my cart and got to work. Figured I could rush through it. Be done by 3:15 at the latest. I was halfway through vacuuming when I heard it. The elevator ding. Which was impossible. Nobody else was in the building. Frank never left his desk. And the elevators were supposed to be locked down after midnight. I turned off the vacuum and listened. Footsteps. High heels clicking on the tile floor. Getting closer. I ducked behind a cubicle and waited. The footsteps passed right by me. I could see shadows moving but no person. Just shadows walking down the hallway. I stayed hidden until the footsteps faded. Checked my phone. 3:03 a.m. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. I wanted to run. Get out of there. But I forced myself to stay calm. Finish the job. Get to the elevator. I was almost there when I heard voices. Multiple people talking. Laughing. It sounded like a party or a meeting. Coming from the big conference room at the end of the hall. The door was closed but I could see light underneath. Every instinct told me to leave. Get in the elevator and go. But I had to look. Had to know what was happening. I crept down the hallway and put my ear to the door. The voices were clearer now. Men and women. Talking about quarterly reports and sales figures. Normal office stuff. I grabbed the door handle. Turned it slowly. Pushed the door open just a crack. What I saw made no sense. The conference room was full of people. At least 20 of them. All in business suits. All sitting around the big table. Having a completely normal meeting. Except they were all wrong. Their faces were blurry. Like looking at them through frosted glass. Their voices didn't match their mouths. And they were cold. I could feel it from the doorway. Like opening a freezer. One of them must have noticed the door open because they all turned to look at me. All at once. Same movement, same speed. I ran. Didn't even close the door. Just ran for the elevator. Hit the button about 50 times. When it finally came, I jumped in and hit L for lobby. The ride down felt like hours. I kept expecting the elevator to stop, for those things to get in, but it didn't. When the doors opened, Frank was standing there, like he'd been waiting for me. "I told you," he said. "After 3 a.m. they come back." "Who comes back?" I asked. I was out of breath, sweating, probably looked crazy. Frank walked me over to his desk, showed me an old newspaper article on his computer. From 2003, there had been a fire on the 27th floor. During a late night meeting, emergency exits were blocked. 23 people died. They never figured out what caused it. "Every night at 3 a.m. they have their meeting," Frank said. "Same as the night they died. I've seen them too. That's why I warned you." I asked him why nobody else knew about this, why the company still used that floor. He just shrugged, said as long as nobody was there after 3 it didn't matter. The dead kept to their schedule. I finished my shift that night, but I wasn't the same. Kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. When 7 a.m. came, I practically ran out of the building. Didn't even say goodbye to Frank. I tried to go back the next night. Told myself I was being stupid. It was just my imagination. Stress from work. But when I got to the building, I couldn't go in. Sat in my car for an hour trying to psyche myself up. Finally called my supervisor. Told him I was sick. I never went back. Quit the next day. Found a new job cleaning a school. Day shift only. My supervisor was pissed, but I didn't care. Some jobs aren't worth it. Some buildings have too much history. Too many ghosts. I still think about that night sometimes. Wonder if those people know they're dead. If they're stuck in some kind of loop, having the same meeting over and over. Or if they know exactly what they are and they're waiting for someone to join them. Frank still works there as far as I know. Still warning the new janitors about the 27th floor. Most probably think he's crazy, but some listen. Some stay away after 3 a.m. The smart ones anyway. I drove past that building last week. Couldn't help myself. Looked up at the 27th floor. It was dark, but I swear I saw shadows moving in the windows, like people walking around, having their eternal meeting. I keep driving. Don't even slow down anymore. Some things are better left alone. Some warnings are worth listening to. And some floors should stay empty after 3 a.m. That's all I know. That's all I want to know. The basement apartment. I need to tell someone about what happened when I was 17. It's been eating at me for years. Every time I walk past a basement window or smell that particular mix of mold and laundry detergent, I'm right back there. In that apartment. With those sounds. My parents divorced when I was 16. Messy situation. Mom got the house but couldn't afford it on her own, so we had to move. She found this cheap basement apartment on Craigslist. The landlord, Mr. Kowalski, lived upstairs. He was this old Polish guy who barely spoke English, but the rent was only $600 a month, utilities included. Mom couldn't pass that up. The place was exactly what you'd expect for that price. Low ceilings, tiny windows at ground level. Everything smelled damp. The walls were this ugly yellow color that made you feel sick if you looked at them too long. But it had 2 bedrooms and we were desperate. I remember the first night we moved in, lying in my new room listening to every little sound. In our old house I knew what every creak meant, which floorboard was loose, which pipe rattled. But this place was full of new noises, unfamiliar groans and clicks. I told myself I'd get used to it. The first few weeks were okay. I was busy with school. Junior year. Lots of homework, track practice after school. I'd come home exhausted and pass out. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital, so I was alone most evenings. Just me and whatever I could find in the fridge for dinner. It was about a month in when I started noticing weird stuff. Little things at first. I'd come home and find the TV on, but I always turned it off before leaving. Mom swore she hadn't been home. I figured maybe I was just forgetting. Stress from school or whatever. Then things started moving. I'd leave my backpack by the door and find it in the kitchen. My shoes would be in different places, still paired up but not where I left them. Mom noticed it too, but we just blamed each other. Thought we were both getting forgetful. The sound started next. At night mostly. This scratching noise in the walls. Not like mice. Too loud for that. More like someone dragging their fingers along the inside of the drywall. It would start in one corner and slowly move across the room. Sometimes it lasted hours. I tried recording it on my phone, but the audio always came out weird. Just static and this low humming sound. Played it for my friend Jake at school. He said it sounded like interference, like something was messing with the recording. Mom heard it too, but she was too tired to care. Said old buildings make noise. Told me to wear headphones if it bothered me. But headphones made it worse. Made me feel vulnerable. Like I couldn't hear if something was coming. About 2 months and I saw him for the first time. I was doing homework at the kitchen table. It was maybe 9 p.m. I felt that watched feeling you get sometimes. Looked up and there was a face in the window. The little ground level window above the sink. Just a pale face staring down at me. I couldn't see features. Just the outline. White skin pressed against the glass. I screamed and it disappeared. Ran upstairs to tell Mr. Kowalski someone was creeping around his yard. He just mumbled something in Polish and shut the door in my face. I started keeping the curtains closed after that. All of them. Made the apartment even darker, but I didn't care. Couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always looking in. Watching me. Mom said I was being paranoid. That it was probably just someone walking by. But our windows were in the back of the house. Nobody should have been back there. The scratching got worse. Louder. More insistent. And it wasn't just in my room anymore. I'd hear it in the living room. The bathroom. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from inside the furniture. I'd be watching TV and hear it in the couch cushions. Right underneath me. Then I started finding things. Weird things. A tooth in my dresser drawer. Not a human tooth. Too big for that. Maybe from a dog or something. A clump of hair in my backpack. Long and black and greasy. Smelled like wet animal. Dead bugs arranged in little patterns on my windowsill. Always in groups of 3. I tried to show Mom, but the stuff always disappeared before she got home. She started getting frustrated with me. Said I was making things up for attention. That the divorce had messed me up. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was going crazy. But I know what I saw that night in December. I know it was real because I still have the scar to prove it. I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. The apartment was freezing. Could see my breath in the air. That wasn't normal. We had heat. I could hear the radiator clanking. But it was like all the warmth was being sucked out. The bathroom door was closed, which was weird. We never closed it. Just me and Mom living there. No need for privacy. I pushed it open and froze. There was someone in the bathtub. Sitting in the dark. Could just make out the shape. Human but wrong. Too tall. Too thin. Arms too long. It was facing away from me, but I could see it breathing. These deep wet sounds like it had water in its lungs. I backed away slowly, trying not to make noise, but I hit the wall. Knocked over the little table we kept towels on. The thing in the tub moved, started to turn around. I ran. Slammed into my bedroom door so hard I split my forehead open. Blood everywhere. But I locked the door and pushed my dresser in front of it. I sat there bleeding and crying until the sun came up. Too scared to move. Too scared to call for help. When Mom finally came home, she found me passed out on the floor. Rushed me to the hospital. Needed 6 stitches. I told her everything. About the face in the window. The things in my drawers. The creature in the bathroom. She didn't believe me. Nobody did. The doctor said it was a stress-induced hallucination. Gave me pills to help me sleep. But pills don't make things go away. They just make you too drowsy to care. We stayed in that apartment another 3 months. 3 months of hell. The thing in the bathroom became a regular visitor. Always at 3 a.m. Always in the tub. I stopped using that bathroom. Started peeing in bottles. Showering at school after track practice. Mom thought I'd lost it completely. Started talking about therapy. Maybe sending me to live with Dad. But I couldn't leave her alone with that thing. Even if she couldn't see it. Even if she thought I was crazy. The breaking point came in March. I came home from practice and found Mom in the kitchen. Just standing there. Staring at the wall. Not moving. Not blinking. I called her name, but she didn't respond. Touched her shoulder and she was ice cold. Then she turned to look at me. But it wasn't her. Same face. Same body. But the eyes were wrong. Black. Empty. Like looking into holes. She smiled and her teeth were too sharp. Too many of them. I ran upstairs. Banged on Mr. Kowalski's door until he answered. Begged him to help. To call 911. He looked at me with this sad expression. Like he'd been expecting this. "You should not have moved in there," he said in broken English. I try to warn, but your mother, she not listen. He told me the truth about the basement, how the last 3 tenants had all gone missing, how he tried to seal it up but needed the rent money, how something lived down there, had always lived down there, in the walls, in the pipes, in the dark spaces nobody looks. We went back down together. Mom was passed out on the kitchen floor, normal again, eyes closed, breathing regular. We got her to the hospital. Doctors said she'd had some kind of seizure, but I knew better. That thing had been inside her, using her. We moved out that week, stayed in a motel until Mom found us a new place, a normal apartment, 3rd floor, lots of windows, lots of light. She never asked me about what happened. I think part of her remembered, part of her knew I'd been telling the truth. Mr. Kowalski died last year. Heart attack. I saw it in the paper. The house is for sale now, including the basement apartment. They've listed it for the same price. $600 a month, utilities included. Some desperate family will see that and think they found a deal. I've thought about warning them, leaving a note, something. But who'd believe me? Just some crazy kid with a scar on his forehead talking about monsters in the bathtub. They'd move in anyway, and then they'd learn, the hard way, like I did. Sometimes I drive by the old place, park across the street and watch. The basement windows are dark, but I know it's still there, waiting, scratching at the walls, sitting in the bathtub at 3 a.m., looking for new people to play with. I still have nightmares about it. Wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. Check my bathroom just to be sure. My therapist says it's PTSD. That trauma can manifest in weird ways. But she didn't see what I saw. Didn't hear those sounds. Didn't find teeth in her drawer. I'm 24 now. Have my own place. A studio on the 8th floor of a building downtown. No basement. No ground level windows. No bathtub. Just a shower stall I can see into completely. Some people think I'm paranoid. But I know what's out there. What's underneath. Waiting in the dark. And I'm never going underground again. The night security guard. I've been doing security work for almost 30 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Drunk people trying to break into buildings. Kids vandalizing property. The occasional theft. But what happened at Riverside Manufacturing last winter changed everything I thought I knew about this job. The company hired me to watch their main facility on the outskirts of town. Big place. Used to make car parts back in the day. Now they do something with electronics. Never really understood what exactly. The pay was good though. Better than my last job at the mall. And it was quiet. Just me walking around a bunch of machines and conveyor belts all night. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The factory shut down at 9, so by the time I got there the place was empty. Just me and row after row of silent equipment. I had a little office near the main entrance where I could watch the security monitors. 12 cameras covering the whole facility. Nothing ever happened. I do my rounds every 2 hours, check the doors, make sure everything was locked up tight, then go back to my office and read. I'm not much of a reader, but night shifts give you lots of time to kill. I'd go through 2 or 3 paperbacks a week. Mostly crime stuff. Sometimes horror, which looking back seems kind of ironic. Sitting there reading about monsters while the real thing was right under my nose. The building was old. Built in the 50s. You could feel it in the walls. That old building smell. Mix of machine oil and dust and something else I could never place. The fellow who trained me was this guy named Carl. Worked security there for 20 years before retiring. He gave me the tour, showed me where everything was. Seemed nervous the whole time. When we got to the basement, he stopped at the door. "You don't need to go down there," he said. "Nothing to check. Just storage." I asked him what kind of storage. He mumbled something about old equipment, then changed the subject. I should have pushed harder. Should have asked more questions. But I figured he was just some paranoid old man. Probably spent too many years alone in this place. My first month was completely normal. Did my rounds, read my books, collected my paycheck. The other security guys who worked the day and evening shifts seemed like decent people. We'd chat during shift changes, compare notes. Nobody ever mentioned anything strange. Then I met Diane. She worked in accounting. Sometimes stayed late to finish reports. Pretty woman, maybe 45. We started talking when she'd pass my office on her way out. Just friendly conversation. She'd been with the company 15 years. Knew everybody. Knew all the gossip. One night I asked her about the basement, why nobody ever went down there. She got this look on her face, like I'd asked something I shouldn't have. Some things are better left alone, she said. Then she left. Didn't even say goodbye. That got me curious. What kind of security guard doesn't check every part of the building? That's literally my job. So the next night I decided to take a look. Found the door Carl had shown me. Heavy metal thing with 3 different locks. But I had the keys. They were on the ring with all the others. The stairs going down were steep. No handrail. Just concrete walls on both sides. The light switch at the top didn't work, so I used my flashlight. The basement was bigger than I expected. Stretched out under the whole building. Rows of metal shelving covered in dust. Old machinery pushed against the walls. And boxes. Hundreds of cardboard boxes stacked everywhere. I checked a few of them. Mostly old paperwork. Invoices from the 60s. Employee records. Nothing interesting. But as I went deeper into the basement, the boxes got newer and weirder. One had what looked like medical equipment. Syringes. Tubing. Machines I didn't recognize. Another was full of photographs. Black and white shots of people I didn't know. All of them looked sick. Pale. Thin. Scared. At the very back of the basement I found a door. Different from the others. Newer. Had a keypad lock instead of regular keys. No windows. But I could hear something on the other side. A humming sound. Like machinery running. Which made no sense. This part of the building wasn't supposed to be active. I tried a few random codes on the keypad but nothing worked. Decided to leave it alone for now. Headed back upstairs. But as I was walking through the rows of shelves I noticed something. Footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. Someone had been down here recently. And they'd gone straight to that locked door. The next few nights I kept thinking about that door. What was behind it? Why was it locked? Who had been down there? I started paying more attention to the cameras. Watching for anything unusual. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every Thursday at exactly 2 a.m. the camera in the loading dock would flicker. Just for a second. Like something was interfering with the signal. And every Thursday at 2:15 a.m. I'd hear the freight elevator running. The one that went to the basement. But according to the logs nobody was in the building except me. So I waited. Next Thursday I positioned myself near the loading dock at 1:45 a.m. Turned off my flashlight. Found a spot behind some crates where I could see but not be seen. Right on schedule at 2 a.m. the camera flickered. Then I heard the overhead door rolling up. The one that trucks back up to for deliveries. A van pulled in. No headlights. No company logo. Just a plain white van. 3 men got out. All wearing surgical masks and gloves. They opened the back of the van and started unloading something. I couldn't see what at first. Then one of them moved and I got a clear view. People. They were unloading people. Unconscious from the looks of it. Wrapped in clear plastic like furniture. The men were careful. Gentle even. Like they were handling something fragile. They loaded the bodies onto a cart and wheeled them to the freight elevator. I heard it going down. All the way to the basement. I should have called the police right then. Should have done something. But I was frozen. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. Kidnapping? Human trafficking? Murder? None of it made sense. This was supposed to be an electronics factory. I waited until I heard the elevator coming back up. The men came out with a different cart. This one had boxes on it. Same kind I'd seen in the basement. They loaded them into the van and drove away. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes. Then everything went back to normal. Like it never happened. I spent the rest of my shift in my office. Doors locked. Trying to figure out what to do. Call the cops? Quit. Pretend I didn't see anything? By morning I decided to do some investigating first. Get proof. Evidence. Something more than just my word. Over the next week I started digging. Looked through old files. Checked computer records. Found some interesting stuff. The company had a whole division I'd never heard of. Research and development. But there was no R&D department in the building. At least not that I could find. All the paperwork led back to the basement. To that locked door. I also found employee records for people I'd never seen. Scientists. Doctors. All hired in the last 5 years. All working in R&D. But they were ghosts. Never showed up on camera. Never signed in or out. Just names on paper collecting paychecks. Thursday came around again. This time I was ready. Had my phone set to record. Positioned myself in the same spot. 2 a.m. the van arrived. Same routine. But this time I followed them. Stayed way back. Quiet as I could be. They went down to the basement just like before. I gave them a few minutes, then crept down the stairs. The basement was different. Someone had cleaned up. The dust was gone. The boxes were organized. And that door at the back was open. Bright light spilling out. I could hear voices. Machines beeping. That humming sound louder than before. I moved closer. Peeked around the door frame. What I saw still gives me nightmares. It was like a hospital room. But wrong. The walls were white tile. Drains in the floor. Medical equipment everywhere. And tables. 6 metal tables with people strapped to them. The people from the van. But they were awake now. Eyes wide open. Mouths moving like they were screaming, but no sound came out. There were others too. People in white coats. Doctors maybe. Or scientists. They were doing things to the people on the tables. Injecting them with something. Attaching wires to their heads. Taking notes on clipboards. Clinical. Detached. Like they were working on lab rats, not human beings. I must have made a noise because one of them looked up. Looked right at me. For a second we just stared at each other. Then he smiled. Actually smiled. And reached for something on the table next to him. I ran. Didn't care about being quiet anymore. Just ran. Up the stairs. Through the factory. Out the door. Got in my car and drove. Didn't stop until I was home. Locked every door. Every window. Sat there with my phone trying to decide who to call. But then I started thinking. These people, whoever they were, had money. Power. Connections. The police might be in on it. Or they might not believe me. A security guard with a wild story and no proof. They'd cleaned up the basement once. They could do it again. So I did the coward thing. I quit. Called in the next day and said I wasn't coming back. Family emergency. They didn't argue. Didn't ask questions. Just said they'd mail my last check. Which they did. Along with a bonus. A big one. Enough to keep my mouth shut. I found a new job. Different company. Day shift this time. Tried to forget what I'd seen. But you don't forget something like that. Every time I see a white van I think about it. Every time I pass that factory I wonder if they're still down there. Doing their experiments. Their research. Whatever the hell they were doing to those people. Diane called me once. About a month after I quit. Asked if I was okay. Said she'd heard I'd left suddenly. I told her I was fine. New job. Better hours. She seemed relieved. Then right before she hung up she said something. You were smart to leave. Some doors should stay locked. I knew then that she knew. That probably lots of people knew. But they all kept quiet. Because it was safer. Because they had bills to pay. Because whatever was happening in that basement was bigger than any of us. It's been a year now. I still have nightmares. Still jump at shadows. But I'm alive. Which is more than I can say for those people on the tables. I think about them sometimes. Wonder who they were. If anyone's looking for them. If they're still alive down there. I drove by the factory last week. Couldn't help myself. It was late. After midnight. The parking lot was empty except for one car. The night security guard's car. Some new guy who had no idea what he was guarding. What was underneath his feet. Part of me wanted to warn him. Tell him to stay out of the basement. To quit while he could. But I didn't. Because I'm a coward. Because I value my life more than my conscience. Because some secrets are too dangerous to share. But I'm sharing it now. Here. Where it's anonymous. Where they can't trace it back to me. Maybe someone will read this and investigate. Maybe they'll shut it down. Or maybe they'll just think I'm crazy. Another paranoid security guard with an overactive imagination. Either way, I've said my piece. Told my story. My conscience is a little clearer. Not much, but a little. And if you ever find yourself working security at an old factory on the outskirts of town, if they tell you not to go in the basement, if you hear the freight elevator running at 2 a.m. on Thursday nights, take my advice. Don't investigate. Don't be a hero. Just quit. Walk away. Find another job. Because some things are worse than unemployment. Some secrets are better left buried. And some basements should never be explored. Trust me on this. I've seen what's down there. And I'll never be the same. The last light of Willow Creek. The police found Sarah Miller's diary buried in her backyard 3 days after she disappeared. But what they read inside made them wish they had never opened it at all. Sarah had always been the quiet type in the small town of Willow Creek, Maine, the kind of person who kept to herself and worked at the local library, organizing books and helping elderly folks find their favorite mysteries, but nobody knew about the strange things she had been seeing in the old lighthouse that stood abandoned at the edge of town, its light having gone dark 50 years ago after the keeper, Thomas Gray, vanished without a trace on a foggy October night much like the one when Sarah first noticed something moving in the tower window. She had been walking her golden retriever, Max, along the coastal path that evening, enjoying the salt breeze and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below, when Max suddenly stopped and began growling at the lighthouse, his fur standing on end as he stared at the dark structure that loomed against the purple sky. Sarah tried to pull him away, telling him it was just an old building, nothing to be afraid of, but then she saw it too, a pale blue light flickering in the top window, moving slowly from side to side like someone carrying a lantern, even though everyone knew the lighthouse had been locked and boarded up since before she was born. She told herself it was just a reflection, maybe moonlight bouncing off broken glass, but deep down she knew the moon was hidden behind thick clouds that night, and there was no explanation for what she was seeing that made any sense. The next morning she mentioned it casually to Mrs. Henderson at the library, asking if anyone ever went up to the old lighthouse anymore, and the elderly woman's face went white as she grabbed Sarah's hand with surprising strength and whispered that some places were better left alone, that the lighthouse had taken enough people already, but when Sarah pressed for more information, Mrs. Henderson just shook her head and hurried away, leaving Sarah more curious than ever. That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the light and Mrs. Henderson's warning, so she did what any librarian would do. She went to the archives and started researching the history of Willow Creek Lighthouse, finding old newspaper clippings about Thomas Gray's disappearance and even more disturbing, similar vanishings that had occurred every 10 years since the lighthouse was built in 1873. The pattern was always the same. Someone would report seeing strange lights in the abandoned tower, they would become obsessed with investigating, and then they would disappear without a trace, leaving behind only confused family members and unanswered questions. Sarah knew she should leave it alone, should listen to Mrs. Henderson's warning, but something about the mystery pulled at her, made her feel like she was meant to solve it. So the next evening she found herself walking back to the lighthouse, this time without Max, who refused to go anywhere near that direction, whimpering and hiding under her bed when she tried to leash him. The closer she got to the lighthouse, the heavier the air felt, thick with fog and something else she couldn't name, a presence that seemed to watch her from the shadows between the rocks. The front door, which she expected to find locked and bolted, stood slightly open, creaking in the wind as if inviting her inside, and against every instinct screaming at her to run, Sarah pushed it open and stepped into the darkness beyond. The smell hit her first, salt and decay and something sweet like rotting flowers, and as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she could make out the spiral staircase winding up into blackness, its iron railings rusty with age and neglect. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal walls covered in strange symbols and words scratched into the wood, messages from previous visitors perhaps, though she couldn't make out what they said in the dancing shadows. As she climbed the stairs, each step groaning under her weight, she heard something that made her blood run cold, footsteps above her, matching her pace perfectly, as if someone was mirroring her movements from the top of the lighthouse. She stopped, and the footsteps stopped too, the silence somehow worse than the sound had been, pressing down on her like a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. Sarah wanted to turn back, knew she should turn back, but something compelled her forward, up and up the spiraling stairs until she reached the lamp room at the top, where the massive lens that once guided ships to safety sat dark and still. That's when she saw him, Thomas Gray, or what was left of him, standing at the window just as she had seen from below, holding a lantern that burned with that same pale blue light. He turned to face her, and Sarah saw that his eyes were gone, replaced by 2 points of that terrible light, and when he smiled, his mouth opened wider than any human mouth should, revealing row after row of teeth like broken glass. He spoke then, his voice like wind through a cave, telling her she was the one they had been waiting for, the one who would finally understand, and as he reached out a hand that seemed to stretch across the room toward her, Sarah felt herself moving forward against her will, drawn to that horrible light like a moth to flame. But then she remembered Max, remembered Mrs. Henderson's warning, remembered all the people who had vanished before her, and with effort that felt like tearing her own soul apart, she wrenched herself backward, stumbling down the stairs as fast as her shaking legs would carry her while that thing that had once been Thomas Gray howled behind her, a sound that was part scream and part storm. She burst out of the lighthouse and ran, not stopping until she reached her house where Max was barking frantically at the door, and she collapsed inside, locking every lock and pulling every curtain closed. For 3 days she stayed inside, calling in sick to work, ignoring the phone when it rang, trying to convince herself it had all been a hallucination, maybe something in the air at the lighthouse, some kind of gas that caused visions. But on the third night, she woke to find her bedroom filled with that pale blue light, and Thomas Gray standing at the foot of her bed, still smiling that impossible smile, and he told her it was too late, that once you saw the light, you belonged to it, that she could run but she would always end up back at the lighthouse because that's where she was meant to be. Sarah tried to scream but no sound came out, tried to move but her body wouldn't respond, and as the light grew brighter and brighter, she felt herself dissolving into it, becoming part of it, understanding finally what Mrs. Henderson had tried to warn her about. The next morning, her neighbor found Max howling on her doorstep and called the police, who found Sarah's bed empty and her diary on the kitchen table, open to the last entry where she had written just 4 words, "The light calls me." They searched the lighthouse, of course, but found nothing except more scratches on the walls, including fresh ones that spelled out Sarah's name over and over again in handwriting that looked like hers but couldn't have been because the scratches went deep into the wood, deeper than fingernails could possibly go. Mrs. Henderson, when they questioned her, just shook her head sadly and said she had tried to warn the girl, that the lighthouse was hungry and it would keep feeding until someone found a way to put out that light for good, but nobody knew how to stop something that existed outside the normal rules of reality. The town council voted to demolish the lighthouse, but when the crew showed up with their equipment, their machines wouldn't start, their tools broke, and 3 workers reported seeing a woman in the tower window who looked exactly like Sarah Miller, holding a blue lantern and beckoning them to come inside. They abandoned the job, and now the lighthouse stands as it always has, waiting for the next curious soul to see the light and wonder what secrets it holds. But the strangest part of the story, the part that keeps the people of Willow Creek awake at night, is that every evening at sunset, 2 lights can be seen in the lighthouse window, one held by a figure that might be Thomas Gray, and one held by someone who looks very much like Sarah Miller, their faces peaceful and terrible as they stand their eternal watch, waiting for the next person to join them in whatever existence they've found beyond the veil of death. The police closed the case, calling it an unexplained disappearance, but they've put up new signs around the lighthouse, warning people to stay away, and most folks in town take the long way around rather than walk past that cursed tower. Only Mrs. Henderson knows the truth, the secret she's kept for 60 years, ever since her own sister vanished in that lighthouse. The knowledge that the light isn't calling people randomly but choosing them specifically, looking for something in their souls that marks them as suitable guardians for whatever ancient thing lives in that tower. She's old now, too old to do anything about it, but sometimes she wonders if she should have told Sarah the whole truth, should have explained that the only way to break the curse is to find someone willing to take your place, to pass on the burden of the light to another soul, but she knows that would make her no better than the thing in the lighthouse, turning innocent people into monsters just to save themselves. So she keeps her silence and prays that no one else will see the light, even though she knows it's only a matter of time before someone does, because the lighthouse is patient and it has all the time in the world to wait for the next Sarah Miller to come along, curious and brave and doomed. And on quiet nights, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, blocking out the stars and muffling all sound except the endless rhythm of the waves, people swear they can hear voices calling from the lighthouse, soft and sweet and impossible to ignore, promising answers to questions you didn't even know you had, offering peace and purpose and a place where you'll never be alone again, where you'll be part of something bigger than yourself, part of the light that never goes out, never stops calling, never stops feeding on the souls of the curious and the lost. The substitute teacher. I still can't eat strawberry jam without feeling sick. That's what she smelled like, artificial strawberry mixed with something chemical, like cleaning fluid. Mrs. Brennan was her name, and she was my substitute teacher for 2 months in 2018 when I was in 7th grade. Our regular teacher, Mr. Davidson, had a heart attack right before Thanksgiving break. We were all pretty upset about it because he was one of those cool teachers who actually made history fun. The principal told us we'd have a long-term substitute until they could find a permanent replacement. When Mrs. Brennan walked in that first Monday after break, something felt wrong right away. She was probably in her 50s, really thin with dyed red hair that looked crispy from too much bleach. Her clothes were always too tight and she wore this bright pink lipstick that got on her teeth. But it wasn't how she looked that bothered me. It was how she acted. The first weird thing happened on her second day. She was taking attendance, and when she got to my name, Emma, she stopped. Just stared at me for way too long. Then she smiled this huge smile and said, "Emma. What a pretty name for such a special girl." The way she said special made my skin crawl. After that, she started paying way too much attention to me. She'd call on me constantly in class, even when I didn't raise my hand. She'd stand right behind my desk while teaching, close enough that I could smell that strawberry perfume. Sometimes I'd feel her touching my hair, just lightly, like she was petting a cat. My friend Sarah sat next to me and she noticed it too. She told me Mrs. Brennan never looked at anyone else the way she looked at me. It was like I was the only student in the room. Things got worse after Christmas break. Mrs. Brennan started keeping me after class for made-up reasons. She'd say my handwriting needed work, or that she wanted to discuss my last essay, even though I was getting A's. During these sessions, she'd sit way too close and ask personal questions. Did I have a boyfriend? What did I like to do after school? Did my parents work late? One day in late January, she asked if I wanted to earn some extra credit by helping her organize supplies after school. I said no, that my mom was picking me up. She got this look on her face, disappointed but also angry. She said, "That's too bad, Emma. I had something special planned for us." I started faking sick to avoid school. My parents thought I was being dramatic about not liking the substitute. They didn't understand how scared I was getting. The breaking point came in February. It was a Wednesday and I'd stayed after school for basketball practice. Practice ended early because of a pipe burst in the gym. As I was walking to the front entrance to wait for my dad, I passed Mrs. Brennan's classroom. The door was cracked open and I heard her voice. She was on the phone and I stopped when I heard my name. I stood against the wall and listened. She was saying, "Yes, Emma Mitchell. 13 years old. Brown hair, green eyes. No, the parents don't suspect anything. I've been very careful." My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I already have the room prepared. Pink walls, just like she mentioned in her creative writing essay. Everything a young girl would want." I ran straight to the principal's office, but it was locked since it was after hours. I called my dad crying and told him to come get me right away. When he arrived, I told him everything. This time he believed me. My parents went to the principal the next morning. They demanded to know more about Mrs. Brennan's background. Turns out, the school had done a basic check but nothing thorough because they were desperate for a substitute. When they dug deeper, they found out Mrs. Brennan wasn't even her real name. She'd been using fake credentials. The police got involved. They searched her house and found a room exactly like she described on the phone. Pink walls, a bed with unicorn sheets, stuffed animals everywhere. They also found notebooks filled with information about me, my schedule, my friends' names, even photos taken without me knowing. But here's the part that still gives me nightmares. In her basement, they found driver's licenses and personal items from 3 other girls from different states. All brown hair, green eyes, all around my age. The police never found those girls. Mrs. Brennan, or whatever her real name was, disappeared before they could arrest her. Her house was abandoned, but that room stayed exactly as she'd prepared it. They think she'd been planning to take me there. We moved to a different school district after that. My parents said it was because of my dad's job, but I knew the truth. They were scared she'd come back for me. It's been 7 years now. I'm in college, living in a different state. But sometimes I still have dreams about that strawberry smell, about turning around in a store or on campus and seeing her standing there with that horrible smile. I check locks 3 times before bed. I never stay after class alone with teachers. And I can't eat strawberry jam without remembering the woman who wanted to steal me away. The police told us she's still out there somewhere. They also said I was lucky, that my instincts saved me. But I don't feel lucky. I feel like I'm still waiting for her to finish what she started. My college roommate. My sophomore year roommate tried to become me. I mean that literally. By the end of fall semester, she was wearing my clothes, styling her hair like mine, and telling people stories from my life as if they were hers. I met Jessica through the university housing portal in summer 2021. We chatted online and she seemed perfect, same major, like the same music, both from the Midwest. When she suggested we room together, I was thrilled. Finally, a roommate who wouldn't be a total stranger. Move-in day was normal. Jessica was friendly but quiet, maybe a little nervous. She'd brought hardly anything with her, just some basic clothes, bedding, and school supplies. When I offered to share my mini fridge and microwave, she seemed overly grateful, almost tearful. I figured she was just homesick. The first month was actually great. We'd stay up late talking, walk to classes together, grab lunch between lectures. Jessica was a good listener, really good. She wanted to know everything about me. My childhood, my family, my ex-boyfriends, my dreams. I thought it was nice having someone so interested in my life. But then small things started happening. I'd find Jessica trying on my clothes when she thought I was in class. She'd laugh it off, saying she just wanted to see how they looked. Then I noticed she'd started buying the exact same clothes as me, just in different colors. When I mentioned it, she said we just had similar taste. By October, it was getting creepy. Jessica had dyed her hair the same shade of blonde as mine. She'd started wearing the same perfume, using the same expressions I used, even laughing like me. Our suite mates started joking that we were turning into twins. One night, I came back from the library earlier than expected. Jessica was on the phone with someone and I heard her say, "Yeah, my dad's a dentist in Columbus. I've got 2 younger brothers, Tommy and Sean." That was my family she was describing. When I confronted her, she hung up quickly and said she was just practicing for a creative writing assignment. I started paying closer attention after that. Jessica was telling people my stories. The time I broke my arm falling off my bike at age 7 became her story. My high school boyfriend Tyler became her ex. She even started using my hometown as hers when people asked where she was from. I tried talking to our RA about it, but she just thought we were having typical roommate drama. Nobody seemed to understand how violating it felt to watch someone steal pieces of your identity. Things escalated before Thanksgiving break. I walked into our room and found Jessica at my desk, on my laptop. She'd figured out my password and was scrolling through my Facebook, studying old photos. When I freaked out, she didn't even apologize. She just stared at me with this blank expression and said, "I need to know everything." That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to find Jessica standing over my bed, just watching me sleep. I screamed and she stepped back, acting confused like she'd been sleepwalking. But I'd seen her eyes. She was wide awake. I packed some stuff and stayed with a friend for the rest of the week. When I finally went back to get more clothes, I found something that made my skin crawl. Jessica had created a notebook about me. Pages and pages of details, my daily routine, my habits, the way I held my pen, how I answered the phone. She'd even practiced my signature hundreds of times. But the worst part was the photos. She'd taken pictures of me sleeping, eating, walking to class. Pictures I had no idea existed. And in some of them, she'd cut out her own face from other photos and pasted it over mine. I went straight to campus security. This time they took it seriously. When they questioned Jessica, she broke down completely. She kept saying she wasn't trying to hurt me, that she just wanted to be me because her own life was so empty. She said I was everything she wished she could be. They moved her to a different dorm immediately and told her to stay away from me. The university required her to go to counseling. I thought that would be the end of it. But after winter break, even though Jessica kept her distance physically, I started noticing other things. She'd made friends with people in my major, joined the same clubs I was in, even started dating a guy who looked weirdly similar to my ex. It was like she was living a parallel version of my life. Then one day in March, I got a call from my mom. She said she'd gotten a strange Facebook message from someone claiming to be her daughter's roommate, asking about family recipes and childhood memories. The account was under a different name, but I knew it was Jessica. I filed a restraining order after that. The university finally took real action and Jessica was expelled. I found out later that this wasn't her first time doing this. She'd been kicked out of her previous college for the same thing with another girl. Before she left campus, Jessica sent me one last email. It said, "I know you hate me, but you should be flattered. Out of everyone I chose you. You're perfect. I just wanted to feel what it was like to be perfect too." I graduated last year and moved across the country for work. I've made my social media completely private and I'm careful about what information I share with new people. But sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, watching from a distance, still trying to be me. The thing that scares me most is that she was so good at it. By the end, some people couldn't tell us apart. What if somewhere out there she's introducing herself with my name, living the life she learned to copy? What if there's another me walking around and I'll never know? The new youth pastor. The nicest people can be the most dangerous. That's what I learned when our church hired Mark Whitman as the new youth pastor in 2019. I was 16 and had been going to First Baptist since I was born. When Pastor Rick announced we were finally getting a dedicated youth leader, all the teenagers were excited. We'd been asking for one for years. Mark seemed perfect. He was young, maybe late 20s, with this huge friendly smile and endless energy. He wore jeans and band t-shirts to youth group, played guitar, and actually understood our references. After years of boring Sunday school with elderly teachers, Mark felt like a revolution. He started all these cool programs. Wednesday night youth group became the highlight of our week. He organized movie nights, camping trips, even a Christian battle of the bands. Parents loved him because attendance tripled. Kids who never came to church started showing up just to hang out with Mark. I was one of the core group of kids who helped him set up events. There were 6 of us, me, my best friend Katie, 2 guys from my school, and 2 homeschooled siblings. Mark called us his leadership team and made us feel special, important. The first sign something was off came during a camping trip in late spring. We were sitting around the campfire and Mark started talking about trust. He said real faith meant being able to confess everything, even the things we were most ashamed of. Then he suggested we play a game where everyone shared their deepest secret. When some kids looked uncomfortable, Mark got this intense look and said disappointment in God's workers was a sin. He made it seem like not participating meant we didn't trust God. So everyone shared. Some kids talked about cheating on tests, others about family problems. Mark just nodded and smiled, but I noticed he was recording everything on his phone. He said it was for prayer purposes. After that camping trip, Mark started having one-on-one counseling sessions with kids who'd shared heavy stuff. He said it was to help them work through their problems with God's guidance. Parents thought it was amazing that he cared so much. But Katie told me her sessions made her uncomfortable. Mark would ask for more and more details about her problems, especially anything involving her body or relationships. He'd phrase everything in religious terms, but the questions were invasive. When she tried to change the subject, he'd guilt her about not being open to God's healing. I started noticing other things. Mark would text us late at night, like 1 or 2 a.m. They'd start innocent, praying for you. But then he'd keep the conversation going, asking what we were wearing to bed or if we'd been having impure thoughts. If anyone didn't respond, he'd bring it up at youth group, making comments about how some people weren't committed to their spiritual growth. The situation exploded during summer mission trip planning. Mark announced we'd be going to Mexico to build houses. But when parents asked for details, he was vague about which organization we'd work with or where we'd stay. He said we needed to trust him and that too many questions showed lack of faith. My dad worked in insurance and something felt wrong to him. He did some digging and found out Mark hadn't actually coordinated with any legitimate mission organization. The address he'd given for where we'd stay didn't exist. When my dad confronted him, Mark got defensive and accused him of trying to sabotage God's work. That's when other parents started comparing notes. Several kids had mentioned the late-night texts. Others had noticed Mark discouraged them from talking to their parents about youth group stuff, saying it was just between us and God. Some kids had given him money for various spiritual purposes that was never accounted for. The church board launched an investigation. What they found was terrifying. Mark Whitman wasn't even his real name. He had no pastoral degree, no background in theology. He'd been fired from 2 previous churches for inappropriate conduct with minors, but had always disappeared before charges could be filed. They also found out about the recordings. He had hours of kids' confessions, including personal information that could be used for blackmail. He'd been building files on each of us, our fears, our secrets, our family problems. The police thought he was planning something bigger, possibly grooming us for trafficking or worse. When they went to arrest him, Mark was gone. He'd cleared out his apartment in the middle of the night. The only thing he left was a Bible with certain verses highlighted, all about obedience and trusting religious authority. The church fell apart after that. Half the families left, too shocked and guilty about what they'd let happen. Those of us in the leadership team had to go through months of therapy. I found out Mark had been escalating with other kids in ways that made my experience seem mild. It took me years to trust any religious leader again. I still go to church, but at a different one across town. And whenever they hire new staff, I watch for the signs I missed before. The guilt trips disguised as faith, the isolation from parents, the special attention that feels good until it doesn't. They never caught Mark. Sometimes I wonder how many other churches he's infiltrated since then, how many other kids he's convinced that keeping secrets is holy. I think about the youth groups full of trusting teenagers and friendly new pastors, and I want to scream warnings. The hardest part is that before we knew the truth, we all loved him. He made us feel seen and valuable. That's what predators do. They don't look like monsters. They look like the answer to your prayers, right up until they destroy everything you believe in. I keep a photo from that camping trip where we all look so happy around the fire, Mark in the center with his big smile. I look at our faces, so trusting and naive, and I use it as a reminder. Evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it wears a cross necklace and knows all the right Bible verses. The basketball coach. I'm 32 now, but I still can't watch high school basketball without my hands shaking. It's been 16 years since Coach Reynolds destroyed everything I thought I knew about trust, mentorship, and the adults who were supposed to protect us. I was 16 and the starting point guard for Lincoln High's varsity team. Basketball was my entire life back in 2008. I lived for practice, dreamed about college scholarships, and worshipped the ground Coach Reynolds walked on. Everyone did. He'd taken our team to state championships 3 times in 10 years. In our small Ohio town, he was basically a god. Coach Reynolds wasn't like other teachers who kept their distance. He knew every player personally. He'd show up at our other games, baseball, football, whatever we played. He'd take us out for pizza after wins, gave us rides home when our parents couldn't make it, even helped some guys with homework. Parents loved him because he kept kids off the streets and focused on their futures. He took special interest in me junior year. Said I had real potential for a Division I scholarship if I worked hard enough. He offered to give me extra training sessions after regular practice, just him and me in the gym. My parents were thrilled. Free coaching from the best? What could be better? Those sessions started normal. He'd run drills with me, work on my shooting form, push me harder than regular practice. But slowly things changed. He'd need to adjust my stance, which meant his hands on my hips, my back, places that felt wrong but I couldn't explain why. When I made a good shot, he'd hug me just a little too long, a little too tight. Then came the talks. After we'd finished training, he'd have me sit with him in his office. He'd close the door and talk about dedication, about sacrifice, about how special bonds between coaches and players could unlock greatness. He'd tell me about ancient Greece, how warriors and their mentors had deeper connections. I didn't understand what he was getting at, but it made me uncomfortable. One night in December, everything escalated. Practice had run late and everyone else had gone home. I was shooting free throws alone when Coach came out of his office. He said he needed to show me something important for my form. He came up behind me, pressed against my back, and put his hands over mine on the ball. I froze. I knew this wasn't about basketball anymore. When I tried to step away, he gripped my shoulders. He said I was special, that he'd been waiting for a player like me for years. He said what happened between us would make me stronger, make me a champion. He tried to turn me around to face him, and that's when I found my voice. I said I needed to go home, my mom was waiting. His face changed completely. The friendly Coach Reynolds disappeared. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise and said if I told anyone about our special training, he'd make sure I never played basketball again. Not just at Lincoln, anywhere. He had connections at every school in the state. He'd tell them I was uncoachable, had attitude problems, maybe even suggest I was using drugs. I pulled away and ran. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour, shaking and trying to understand what had just happened. This was Coach Reynolds, the man who'd been like a second father to half the team. The person teachers and parents trusted completely. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me over him? And basketball was my future. All my college plans depended on his recommendation. So I started making excuses to skip the extra sessions. Said I needed to focus on grades, that my parents wanted me home earlier. Coach's attitude toward me changed instantly. During regular practice, he'd humiliate me in front of everyone. Made me run extra laps for tiny mistakes. Benched me during important games. Told the team I was getting cocky, losing focus. Some of my teammates turned against me, angry that I was letting the team down. The breaking point came in February. We were at an away game, staying overnight at a motel. Room assignments were supposed to be random, but somehow I ended up alone while everyone else had roommates. Around midnight, I heard a key in my door. Coach walked in using a master key he'd gotten from the front desk. I jumped out of bed and backed against the wall. He stood between me and the door, talking in this calm voice about how I'd been avoiding him, how disappointed he was. He said we could fix everything right now if I just trusted him. When he stepped toward me, I grabbed the motel phone and said I was calling 911. He laughed and said no one would believe me. but when I actually started dialing, he left. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called my older brother who was in college and told him everything. He drove 3 hours to get me, pulled me out of that motel, and took me straight to our parents. The story came pouring out. My parents believed me immediately, but the battle that followed was brutal. When we reported it to the school, they launched an investigation that felt more like an interrogation of me. Why didn't I report it sooner? Why did I keep going to practice? Was I sure I hadn't misunderstood Coach's intentions? Coach Reynolds denied everything. Said I was a troubled kid angry about losing playing time. He had 30 years of spotless reputation. I had the word of a teenager. Other players said they'd never seen anything inappropriate. Parents defended him. The whole town basically chose sides and most chose his. But then something happened. A kid named Marcus, who graduated 2 years earlier, heard about the investigation. He came forward with his own story about Coach Reynolds. Then another former player. Then another. Turns out I wasn't special at all. Coach had been doing this for years, choosing one player each season for his extra attention. It took 7 former players coming forward before the school board finally acted. Coach Reynolds was quietly allowed to resign. No criminal charges because most of us had waited too long to report, and there was no physical evidence. He moved to another state, and last I heard he was coaching at a private school in Texas. The rest of my junior year was hell. Half the town blamed us for ruining their beloved coach. We got death threats. Someone spray-painted "liar" on our garage. I quit basketball, gave up on those college dreams, and finished high school just trying to be invisible. I went to therapy for years. Got a degree in social work because I wanted to protect kids the way no one protected us. I work with at-risk youth now, and I see it all the time, the trusted adult who pushes boundaries, who isolates kids, who uses their power to confuse and control. Sometimes I Google Coach Reynolds. He's still coaching, still being celebrated for building character in young men. His new school's website has testimonials from parents about what an amazing mentor he is. It makes me sick, but it also makes me vigilant. Because I know what signs to watch for now. I know how predators hide in plain sight, wearing whistles instead of warning signs. The other day, my nephew asked if I'd help coach his middle school team. I said yes, but I also made myself a promise. I'll never be alone with a player. Every interaction will be transparent. And if I ever see another coach crossing lines, I won't stay quiet like the adults who must have suspected something about Coach Reynolds but chose to look away. 16 years later, I still have nightmares about that motel room, about what might have happened if I hadn't grabbed that phone. But mostly I think about the other boys in Texas or wherever he is now who have no idea what their hero coach really is. And I wonder if any of them will be brave enough to speak up, or if they'll carry their secret for 16 years like I did. The drama teacher. Looking back at my high school yearbook photos from 2009, I can spot the exact moment Miss Chin started grooming me. It's in the cast photo from our town. I'm smiling at the camera, but she's looking at me with this intense expression that makes my stomach turn even now, 15 years later. I was 17 and completely obsessed with theater. I lived for drama class, stayed after school every day for rehearsals, and spent weekends building sets or running lines. My parents were going through a messy divorce that year, and the drama room became my escape. Miss Chin knew that. She made sure of it. Miss Chin was everything a theater kid could want in a teacher. She was young, maybe 30, and had actually performed off-Broadway before becoming a teacher. She wore flowing scarves and dramatic makeup, quoted Shakespeare in regular conversation, and treated us like real actors instead of kids. She made everyone feel talented, but she made me feel special. It started with compliments. She'd pull me aside after scenes to tell me I had raw emotional depth that was rare for someone my age. She said I reminded her of herself at 17, passionate, misunderstood, destined for greatness. When I cried during a particularly hard day with my parents' divorce, she hugged me and whispered that art would save me like it had saved her. She started giving me lead roles in every production. Other kids noticed but didn't complain much because Miss Chin would say things like, "Becca understands pain in a way that makes her Juliet authentic," or "she's method acting without even knowing it." She turned my personal trauma into artistic validation. By spring semester, our relationship had shifted. She'd invite me to have lunch in her classroom, just the two of us. She'd share stories about her own troubled childhood, her struggles with depression, her failed relationships. She'd cry sometimes and I'd comfort her, feeling mature and important that an adult trusted me with such personal information. The text messages started innocently. She'd send quotes from plays, encouragement before big tests, check-ins about my parents' divorce. But they became more frequent, more personal. She'd text late at night about feeling lonely, about how I was the only person who really understood her. She'd say things like, "If only you were older," followed by, "But age is just a number for old souls like us." When I got into a summer theater intensive program, Miss Chin offered to help me prepare. We'd meet at her apartment on weekends because she said the school atmosphere was too limiting for real artistic work. Her apartment was exactly what you'd expect: vintage posters, candles everywhere, shelves of plays and poetry. It felt sophisticated and adult. I felt sophisticated and adult. During those sessions, she'd have me perform intense emotional scenes. She'd push me to dig deeper, to use my pain about the divorce. Sometimes she'd cry watching me perform, saying I was breaking her heart with my talent. She'd hold my hands, stroke my hair, tell me I was extraordinary. The physical contact increased gradually, a hand on my knee during notes, sitting pressed against me on the couch, long hugs that felt different from normal teacher hugs. One afternoon in July, everything changed. We were working on a scene from A Streetcar Named Desire. She was playing Stanley to my Blanche, teaching me about chemistry and tension. After we finished the scene, she didn't break character. She kept moving closer, said the chemistry between us was undeniable. She kissed me. I froze. Part of me was shocked, but another part felt like this had been building all along. She immediately pulled back, started crying, saying she was a terrible person, that I should leave and never come back. But then she grabbed my hand and begged me not to tell anyone, said it would ruin both our lives. She made me feel responsible for protecting her. I left her apartment in a daze. I felt guilty, special, confused, and scared all at once. I didn't know if I was a victim or a participant. She was my teacher, but she'd made me feel like an equal, like we were both just artists who understood each other. The rest of summer was a nightmare of mixed signals. She'd ignore me for days, then send long texts about how she couldn't stop thinking about me. She'd be cold during drama class, then slip notes into my backpack about how beautiful I was. She'd cast me as the lead again, then criticize my performance harshly in front of everyone, then apologize privately, saying she was just trying to distance herself for both our sakes. I started falling apart. My grades dropped, I quit eating, I couldn't sleep. My mom noticed and asked what was wrong, but how could I explain? Miss Chin had made it seem like we were in this together, like telling would hurt me as much as her. She'd reminded me repeatedly that I was 18 in a few months, that we just had to wait. Everything exploded in October. Another drama student, Jessica, saw Miss Chin and me in her car after school. We were just talking, but Jessica saw Miss Chin touch my face, saw me crying. Jessica went straight to the principal. When they called me into the office, I lied. I protected Miss Chin like she'd programmed me to. I said Jessica was jealous about casting, that Miss Chin was just comforting me about my parents. But they'd already found the text messages on the school's Wi-Fi system. Hundreds of inappropriate messages that looked even worse in black and white. Miss Chin was put on administrative leave immediately. When the full investigation started, 2 other former students came forward with similar stories. The pattern was identical: vulnerable girls, intense emotional connection, gradual boundary crossing, then manipulation to keep quiet. She was fired and lost her teaching license, but avoided criminal charges because I wouldn't cooperate with prosecutors. I was convinced I'd been a willing participant, that our connection had been real. It took years of therapy to understand I'd been groomed by an expert who knew exactly how to exploit a lonely, artistic teenager. The aftermath destroyed my senior year. Everyone knew why Miss Chin was gone, and opinions were split. Some kids thought I was a victim, others thought I was a homewrecker who'd seduced a teacher. I quit theater completely, couldn't even watch plays without feeling sick. The thing I'd loved most became contaminated by her manipulation. I'm a graphic designer now, as far from theater as I could get. I'm married to a wonderful man who knows this story and has helped me heal. But I still have trust issues with mentors, still question any authority figure who shows special interest in me. Last year, I found out Miss Chin was teaching private acting lessons in another state. Not in schools, she can't do that anymore, but one-on-one coaching for ambitious teenagers. My heart broke thinking about those kids, probably feeling as special as I once did, not knowing they're being groomed by someone who perfected her technique on girls like me. I thought about reporting her, but what would I say? She served her punishment technically. She's allowed to work with kids privately. The system failed to protect future victims because it only cared about removing her from schools, not from accessing vulnerable teenagers entirely. Sometimes I reread our old text messages that I saved as evidence. The manipulation is so obvious now, the love bombing, the trauma bonding, the careful boundary pushing disguised as artistic connection. But 17-year-old me couldn't see it. She just felt chosen by someone brilliant who understood her pain. That's what haunts me most. Not what happened, but how willingly I walked into it. How she made abuse feel like love, manipulation feel like mentorship. How she took the thing I loved most, theater, and weaponized it against me. And how somewhere right now she's probably doing it again. The neighbor who helped. I was 15 when Mr. Garrison became our hero. Now, at 33, I understand he was something much darker. But in 2007, when my dad left and my mom was working 3 jobs just to keep our apartment, Mr. Garrison felt like salvation walking through our door. He lived in the unit above ours in our rundown complex in Portland. He was probably 45, divorced, worked from home doing something with computers. He'd always been friendly in that neighbor way, holding doors, helping with groceries, small talk by the mailboxes. When my dad left, he was the only person who asked my mom if she needed help. At first, it was little things. He'd fix our leaky faucet, refuse payment. He'd coincidentally make too much dinner and bring down plates for us. When our car broke down, he drove my mom to work for 2 weeks straight. My mom would cry with gratitude, and I was just relieved someone was helping us not fall apart. Mr. Garrison started taking more interest in me and my younger brother Tyler. He'd invite us up to play video games while mom was at work. His apartment was everything ours wasn't: clean, organized, full of cool tech and gaming systems. He had every console, a massive TV, and shelves of games we could only dream of owning. He made rules from the start. We couldn't tell other kids about coming over because they'd get jealous and want to come too, and his apartment was our special place. We couldn't mention it to mom because she'd feel guilty about us spending so much time there, and she had enough stress. It made sense to me. I was trying so hard to protect my mom from more worry. By winter, we were at his place every day after school. He'd help with homework, make us snacks, let us play games until mom got home. He started buying us things: new backpacks, shoes when ours wore out, even phones so we could text him if we needed anything. When mom tried to refuse, he'd say it was nothing, that he'd always wanted kids and this made him happy. The dynamic started shifting slowly. He'd make comments about how mature I was, how I was the man of the house now. He'd ask if I'd started noticing girls, if I had questions about my changing body. He framed it as normal guy talk since I didn't have a dad around. He'd show me R-rated movies, saying I was old enough to handle them. He became obsessed with our schedules. He needed to know where we were every moment we weren't with him. He got upset if we made plans with friends, said he'd arranged his whole day around us and we were being ungrateful. He'd guilt-trip us about all he'd done for our family, how we'd be homeless without his help. The physical stuff started gradually. Wrestling that got too rough. Massages when I mentioned being sore from PE. Sitting too close during movies, his arm around me in a way that felt wrong but I couldn't explain why. He'd make Tyler go play in the other room during these times, saying I needed older kid attention. One day in March, he showed me porn on his computer. Said it was time I learned about this stuff, that fathers were supposed to teach their sons, but since mine was gone, he'd do it. I was uncomfortable but also curious in that 15-year-old way. He watched my reaction carefully, asked if I had questions, if I wanted to see more. Things escalated from there. He'd leave magazines in places I'd find them. He'd make sexual jokes constantly. He started talking about his own experiences in graphic detail. He'd ask invasive questions about my body, my thoughts, whether I'd experimented with anything. He normalized conversations that I now know were completely inappropriate. The night everything changed, mom was working a double shift and Tyler was sleeping over at a friend's house. Mr. Garrison invited me up for a movie marathon. He bought my favorite snacks, had a whole lineup of action movies planned. For the first hour, it felt normal, safe even. Then he put on a different kind of movie. Not porn exactly, but sexual enough that I felt weird watching it with him. He kept asking if I liked it, if it excited me. When I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm. He said we needed to talk about something important. He told me he loved me like a son. That everything he'd done for our family was because he cared so much. But he also had needs, he said, and he'd been so lonely. He said I was special, mature enough to understand adult relationships. He put his hand on my thigh and said we could help each other. I jerked away and said I needed to go home. His whole demeanor changed. He reminded me of everything he'd done, the rent money he'd helped with, the groceries he'd bought, the rides he'd given. He said if I wasn't grateful, he'd stop helping. We'd be evicted. It would be my fault if we ended up on the street. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was seeing my mom work so hard, maybe it was protective instinct for Tyler, or maybe I just hit my limit. I stood up and said I was leaving. He blocked the door, and for a moment I thought he might actually hurt me. Then I said if he didn't move, I'd scream until every neighbor called the cops. He let me go, but as I left he said, "Your mom's going to be really disappointed when I tell her why I can't help anymore." I didn't sleep that night. I felt guilty, scared, confused. Was I really going to let my family become homeless because I was uncomfortable? Was I overreacting? He hadn't actually done anything physical beyond the hand on my thigh. Maybe I'd misunderstood. The next morning, I broke down and told my mom everything. I expected her to be angry at me for ruining our situation. Instead, she held me and cried. She said she'd suspected something was off but convinced herself she was being paranoid. She'd been so desperate for help she'd ignored her instincts. We reported it to the police, but there wasn't enough evidence for charges. He hadn't technically broken any laws they could prove. We had to see him every day until our lease ended 3 months later. He'd stare at us in the parking lot, leave notes on our door about money we owed him, make sure we knew he was watching. We moved in with my aunt across town after that. It was cramped and far from school, but it was safe. Mom worked even more hours to make ends meet without his help. I got a job at 16 to help out. We survived, but it was harder than it needed to be. Years later, I found out Mr. Garrison had done this before. Same pattern: single mothers, financial help, gradual grooming of the kids. He was smart about staying just within legal boundaries while causing maximum damage. The complex finally evicted him after multiple complaints, but I'm sure he just found a new hunting ground. I'm a father now, and it terrifies me. Not because I'd ever hurt my kids, but because I know how predators work. They don't snatch children off playgrounds. They offer help when you're desperate. They make themselves indispensable. They make children feel complicit in their own abuse. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't left that night. If financial desperation had won over my discomfort. If he'd been just a little more patient, a little more careful. The thought makes me sick, but it also makes me vigilant. When I see men being overly helpful to struggling single moms, I watch closer. When someone insists on keeping special relationships with kids secret, I ask questions. Because Mr. Garrison taught me that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who come bearing gifts, who make you feel guilty for refusing what they offer, who help you just enough that saying no feels impossible. He never went to prison. Never faced real consequences. He just moved on to the next desperate family, the next vulnerable kid. And somewhere out there, he's probably still playing savior while destroying the very people he claims to help. Growing up is supposed to be about discovery, about finding yourself and your place in the world. But for too many of us, it's about survival. It's about learning that the adults you trust most might be the ones who hurt you deepest. It's about understanding years too late that what felt special was actually sinister. These stories aren't easy to tell even now, but they need to be heard. Because somewhere there's a teenager feeling special attention from a teacher, or grateful for a neighbor's help, or confused by a coach's intensity. And maybe, just maybe, these words will help them recognize the danger before it's too late. Trust your gut. Tell someone. You're not crazy, you're not overreacting, and it's not your fault. The shame belongs to them, not to you. Even if it takes 15 years to understand that. The family friend who knew too much. I'm 35 now, but when I close my eyes, I can still smell the leather interior of Dr. Hartley's BMW and feel the weight of secrets I didn't know I was carrying. He wasn't a stranger who appeared in our lives. He'd been there since before I was born, which made everything so much worse. Dr. Hartley was my parents' best friend from medical school. He was at their wedding, in the delivery room when I was born, at every birthday party and holiday dinner. He was the uncle who wasn't blood but might as well have been. That's what made him so dangerous. He was already inside our walls. In 2006, when I was 16, my parents were at the peak of their careers. Both surgeons, both working insane hours. Dr. Hartley was a psychiatrist with a thriving practice, and he became my unofficial therapist, driver, and confidant. My parents trusted him completely. Why wouldn't they? He'd been analyzing our family dynamics for 20 years. The thing about Dr. Hartley was that he knew everything about everyone. He had this way of making you tell him things without realizing you were doing it. He'd been collecting information about our family like files in a cabinet, every fight my parents had, every insecurity I mentioned, every weakness we showed. He studied us like specimens. It started the summer before junior year when my parents asked him to check in on me while they were at a medical conference. I'd been having panic attacks, and who better to help than their psychiatrist best friend? He'd come over in the evenings and we'd sit by the pool talking. He made me feel heard in a way my busy parents couldn't. He had this technique where he'd share a similar story from another patient, never names of course, and it would be so specific to my situation that I'd end up spilling everything. He'd nod thoughtfully, validate my feelings, then subtly plant ideas about how my parents didn't really understand me, how they cared more about their careers than their daughter. By fall, I was convinced Dr. Hartley was the only adult who truly got me. He started offering to drive me places when my parents couldn't, school events, friends' houses, the mall. During these drives, he'd play specific music he knew I loved because I'd told him, stop at my favorite coffee shop because he'd memorized my order, and create this bubble where I felt completely understood. The manipulation was medical, precise. He used actual therapeutic techniques to create dependency. He taught me breathing exercises for my panic attacks, but they only seemed to work when he was guiding me through them. He'd identified my triggers with scary accuracy, but somehow I only felt safe discussing them with him. One night in December, he was driving me home from a friend's house when he took a different route. He pulled into an empty parking lot and turned off the car. My stomach dropped, but he just smiled and said we needed to talk about something important. He'd been reviewing his notes, he said, and was concerned about patterns he was seeing. He told me he believed I had repressed memories, that my panic attacks were my mind trying to tell me something. He said he could help me uncover these memories through hypnotherapy, but we'd have to do it secretly because my parents wouldn't understand. They'd think he was overstepping, but he cared too much about me to let me suffer. I said I wasn't comfortable with hypnosis. His whole demeanor shifted, subtle, but I'd known him my whole life. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He sighed and said he understood, but then started listing every secret I'd ever told him. Not threateningly, just matter-of-factly. How disappointed my parents would be about the party I'd gone to, the boy I'd been seeing, the classes I was failing. He wasn't blackmailing me exactly. He was showing me how much power he had, all while maintaining that concerned therapist voice. He said keeping secrets from parents was normal, healthy even, but it meant I needed someone trustworthy to confide in. Someone who already knew everything anyway. The hypnotherapy sessions started in his home office. At first they seemed legitimate. He'd help me relax, work through anxiety, normal stuff. But the questions got stranger. He wanted to know about dreams, fantasies, thoughts I'd never shared with anyone. He said the subconscious held all our darkest truths and that healing meant facing them. I started having dreams I couldn't quite remember but that left me feeling exposed and sick. He'd ask about them in our next session, and somehow he always knew details I hadn't told him. He said it was because he understood my psyche so well, but something felt violating about it. Everything changed during spring break. My parents were at another conference and I was staying home alone. Dr. Hartley came by to check on me, but something was different. He seemed excited, almost manic. He said he'd had a breakthrough about my case and needed to try a new technique. I refused. For the first time I flat out said no. He got quiet, then asked if I remembered what we discussed during our last hypnosis session. I said I didn't remember much from those sessions. He smiled and said that was interesting because I'd shared some very personal things. Things that would change how everyone saw me if they knew. He pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was my voice, but I was saying things I'd never say consciously. About my parents, about kids at school, about desires I didn't even know I had. I felt sick listening to it. He said this was just one of many recordings, all showing how troubled I really was. But then he made a mistake. He mentioned something specific, a detail about my childhood that I'd never told him, that I'd never told anyone because it wasn't real. It was from a recurring nightmare I'd had as a kid, not a memory. And suddenly I understood. He hadn't been uncovering repressed memories. He'd been planting them. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. Called my aunt who lived across town and begged her to come get me. While I waited, Dr. Hartley stood outside the door, using his psychiatrist voice to tell me I was having a panic attack, that I was confused, that running away was a symptom of my condition. My aunt arrived and found me barricaded in the bathroom while this man who'd known me since birth tried to convince her I was having a mental health crisis. But my aunt was a nurse. She saw through the clinical language to what was really happening. She got me out of there and called my parents. The investigation that followed revealed Dr. Hartley had been doing this to multiple teenage patients, children of friends, kids who trusted him. He'd been using legitimate therapy techniques to create false memories, recording sessions without consent, building psychological profiles he could use for control. Some kids had even more disturbing stories than mine. He lost his license but avoided jail time. His lawyer argued the recordings were inadmissible, that any memories recovered during hypnosis were unreliable. Several families sued him civilly, but he'd hidden his assets well. He disappeared after the settlements and none of us know where he went. The aftermath was almost worse than the abuse. I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. Which memories were real? Which thoughts were mine and which had he planted? My parents were devastated that their best friend had been a predator hiding in plain sight for decades. Our family gatherings felt empty and suspicious. Who else was wearing a mask? I went through years of therapy with someone who specialized in victims of therapeutic abuse. It's a special kind of violation when someone uses healing techniques as weapons. Even now, I struggle with normal therapy. Every question feels loaded, every moment of vulnerability feels dangerous. Last year, my teenage daughter had her first panic attack. My instinct was to handle it privately, not tell anyone, keep her safe from people who might use her anxiety against her. But I fought that instinct. I found her a therapist, one I researched extensively, one who agreed to recorded sessions, one who understood why I needed to be vigilant. Because Dr. Hartley taught me that predators don't always come from outside. Sometimes they're already at your dinner table, holding your baby pictures, knowing your middle name and your mother's fears and exactly which buttons to push. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who's been studying you since before you could form memories, waiting patiently for you to be old enough to manipulate. He stole more than just my trust. He stole my ability to ever fully believe my own mind. And somewhere out there, with a new name and maybe a new degree, he's probably doing it again. Building trust over years, collecting secrets like ammunition, waiting for the perfect vulnerable moment to show what he really is. A family friend who knows too much is the most dangerous predator of all. Because by the time you realize the threat, they already know every escape route you might take, and they've been closing them off one by one for years. The online mentor who found me. People always ask why I don't have social media. The real answer starts in 2007, when I was 14 and thought I'd found my calling as a writer. I'm 31 now, and I still check twice before opening my door, still use a fake name at coffee shops, still panic when unknown numbers call. Because Marcus White proved that some predators don't need to be in the same room to destroy you. I was a lonely kid in rural Georgia, obsessed with poetry and fiction but surrounded by people who didn't get it. My school didn't have a creative writing program. The library was tiny. I felt like I was suffocating in a town that only cared about football and farming. Then I found the forums. Writers United was this massive online community for aspiring authors. You could post your work, get feedback, join challenges. For the first time, I had people who understood me. I spent hours there after school, finally feeling like I belonged somewhere. Marcus was one of the moderators. His username was InkMaster77 and everyone respected him. He gave the best feedback, detailed, thoughtful, always encouraging but honest. He ran weekly workshops in the chat rooms and had helped several young writers get published in small magazines. When he commented on my first posted poem, I nearly cried with joy. He started messaging me privately after a few weeks. Nothing inappropriate, just extra feedback, book recommendations, questions about my writing process. He told me I had real talent, that he saw something special in my work. He shared that he was an editor at a literary magazine in New York, always scouting for fresh voices. Over months, our conversations deepened. He knew I felt trapped in my small town, that my parents didn't understand my writing dreams. He shared his own story of growing up misunderstood in rural Kansas, how moving to New York had saved him. He became my lifeline, the proof that there was a bigger world waiting for me. He was smart about information gathering. He never asked directly for personal details. Instead, he'd share something about his life that would prompt me to reciprocate. He'd mention his high school mascot, and I'd naturally mention mine. He'd talk about his favorite local coffee shop, and I'd describe mine. Piece by piece, he built a complete picture of my life. By spring, he was my closest friend, even though we'd never met. He knew about my fights with my parents, my crush on a boy in English class, my fear that I'd never escape Georgia. He started suggesting we talk on the phone, said hearing a writer's voice helped him understand their work better. My parents didn't know about any of this. I'd learned to hide my online life after they dismissed it as wasting time. The phone calls felt magical at first. Marcus had this deep, warm voice that made me feel sophisticated. He'd talk about the publishing world, about readings he'd attended, about famous authors he'd met. He made my dreams feel achievable. He also started asking for photos, nothing inappropriate, just wanting to put a face to the voice. I sent him my school picture. That's when things shifted. He started calling me beautiful, saying I didn't look like other 14-year-olds, that I had an old soul that showed in my eyes. He began writing poems about me, sending them privately. They started romantic but grew increasingly sexual. When I expressed discomfort, he said I was misunderstanding art, that I was being immature. He introduced the idea of visiting. There was a young writers' conference in Atlanta, he said. He could drive down, meet me there, introduce me to other editors. It would change my life. When I said my parents would never allow it, he had a solution for that too. We'd tell them it was a school-sponsored event. He'd even created fake permission slips and a website for the fictional conference. But then he started getting impatient. The calls became demanding. He needed to see me in person, needed to know if our connection was as strong physically as it was mentally. He started talking about how other young writers he'd mentored had been more grateful, more willing to take risks for their careers. He'd get angry when I couldn't talk, accusing me of not taking my writing seriously. One night in May, everything escalated. He called drunk and emotional. He said he was in love with me, that age was just a number, that I was the muse he'd been searching for his whole life. He described in graphic detail what he wanted to do when we met. I hung up, terrified and disgusted. He called back 17 times that night. The next day, my forum account was deleted. My posted stories were gone. Other members said I'd been banned for plagiarism, that Inkmaster77 had proof I'd stolen my work. My entire online writing community turned against me overnight. Then the emails started, dozens a day, alternating between love declarations and threats to ruin any writing career I might have. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. In his drunken rambling, he'd mentioned his real job, not an editor, but an IT consultant who'd been fired from 3 school districts. With that information, my older sister helped me research. We found his real name, his history, and most terrifyingly, news articles about a missing 15-year-old writer from Ohio who disappeared after attending a young writers' conference. We went to the FBI. Turns out, Marcus White wasn't even his real name. He was Derek Hoffman, 43 years old, with a history of targeting teenage writers across multiple platforms. He'd been using the same playbook for years: build trust, isolate from community, arrange meeting, disappear. They traced his IP address to an apartment in Pennsylvania, but he was gone when they arrived. They found printouts of conversations with dozens of young writers, photos we'd sent him covering his walls, and detailed plans for meetings that thankfully never happened. They also found evidence linking him to 3 missing teenagers over 5 years. The FBI told us I was lucky. He'd been weeks away from driving to Georgia, had already mapped out routes to my house, my school, the coffee shop I'd mentioned loving. He'd been patient, spending 8 months grooming me, but I'd escaped his timeline by hanging up that night. We had to change everything. New phone numbers, new email addresses, eventually a new house when strange cars started driving by. I couldn't write for years, every word felt contaminated by his influence. I'd internalized so much of his feedback that I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine and which were seeds he'd planted. He was never caught. The FBI said he was sophisticated, using advanced methods to hide his location, probably moving constantly. The case is still open, and sometimes I get calls asking if I've noticed anything unusual. I always have, but it's hard to tell what's real and what's trauma. I'm a teacher now, and I see kids on their phones constantly, building relationships with strangers who say all the right things. I want to scream warnings, but I know they wouldn't listen. When you're 14 and lonely and someone finally sees you as special, you don't want to believe they might be hunting you. Last month, one of my students showed me a writing forum she joined. My blood went cold when I saw the interface. similar to Writers United but with a modern design. She was excited about this mentor who was giving her amazing feedback, who really understood her work. I asked his username. Wordsmith82. Different name, same pattern. I reported it to the FBI and spent hours on the phone with my former case agent. They're investigating, but these sites pop up faster than they can track them. And somewhere, Marcus or Derek or whatever he's calling himself now is telling some lonely kid that they're special, that they have an old soul, that he can change their life if they just trust him. The internet was supposed to connect isolated kids like me to bigger worlds. Instead, it gave predators a hunting ground where they could stalk from shadows, build trust from distance, and disappear without a trace when things went wrong. They don't need to grab you off the street anymore. They just need to find your words, your dreams, your loneliness, and know exactly what to say to make you believe they're your salvation. I still write, but never online. My words stay in physical journals that no stranger can access. Because Marcus taught me that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one who speaks your language, who knows your dreams, who builds a door to a bigger world and waits patiently for you to walk through it, straight into their trap. The woman at the grocery store. Everyone warns you about creepy men, but nobody prepared me for Mrs. Patterson. She was just the nice lady at the grocery store who always worked register 3 and remembered everyone's name. I was 15 in 2008, working my first job as a bagger at Kroger, and she seemed like the grandmother everyone wished they had. That's exactly what made her so dangerous. Mrs. Patterson was probably 65, with silver hair always in a neat bun and glasses on a chain around her neck. She brought homemade cookies for the break room, remembered everyone's birthdays, and customers would wait in longer lines just to chat with her. She took me under her wing immediately, said I reminded her of her grandson who lived far away. She started small, teaching me produce codes, showing me how to bag groceries properly, praising me to management. She'd save the best shifts for when we worked together, telling the scheduler we made a great team. My parents loved that I had such a responsible adult looking out for me at work. After a month, she started offering me rides home. My mom usually picked me up, but Mrs. Patterson lived near us and said it was silly for my mom to drive out when she was going that way anyway. She'd call my mom directly, charm her with stories about what a good worker I was. Soon I was riding with her after every shared shift. Those rides started normal, radio on, chatting about school and work. But she began taking longer routes, saying she needed to stop at the bank or pharmacy. She'd buy me snacks, little treats she said growing boys needed. She started asking about my home life, my friends, whether I had a girlfriend. The questions felt grandmotherly at first. Then she started touching me. Just my knee at first, patting it when she laughed. Then my thigh when making a point. Then reaching over to fix my hair, adjust my collar, her hands lingering longer each time. When I'd shift away, she'd look hurt and say she was just being affectionate, that young people today were too cold. She began inviting me to her house on breaks. She lived alone, she said, and got lonely. She'd make lunch, show me photo albums, tell stories about her late husband. But the photos were strange, lots of young men over the years, always teenage employees from the store. When I asked about them, she'd get vague, say she'd always been a mentor to young people. The break room dynamic changed. Other employees started joking about Mrs. Patterson's new favorite, making comments that seemed playful but felt wrong. One older coworker pulled me aside and said to be careful, that Mrs. Patterson went through a special helper every year or so. When I asked what happened to them, he just shrugged and said they usually quit suddenly. By month 3, she was texting me constantly. Sweet messages at first, hoping I had a good day at school, reminding me about my schedule. Then they came later at night, more personal. She'd say she'd been thinking about me, that I was special, that she'd never met a young man quite like me. She started sending photos, nothing explicit, but selfies in her nightgown, pictures from her bathtub with strategically placed bubbles. I was terrified and confused. This was a grandmother figure, a respected employee, someone my parents trusted. But I knew this wasn't normal. When I tried to create distance, she'd become emotional at work, telling other employees I was being cruel to her after all she'd done for me. She'd cry in the break room about how young people didn't appreciate kindness anymore. The manipulation was masterful. She'd scheduled me for shifts where I was the only bagger, so I couldn't avoid her register. She'd loudly praise me to customers, calling me her special boy, embarrassing me into compliance. She'd bring my favorite foods and make a big production of giving them to me, so refusing made me look ungrateful. Everything exploded during the store's Christmas party. It was after hours, employees only, and somehow I ended up alone with her in the stockroom. She'd been drinking wine and got bold. She pressed me against the shelves, tried to kiss me, her hands everywhere. I pushed her away and ran, but she followed, crying and apologizing, saying she'd misread signals. I quit the next day. Didn't even give notice, just never went back. Mrs. Patterson called my house repeatedly, told my mother I'd stolen from the register and she was trying to protect me from prosecution. When my parents confronted me, the whole story came out. My dad went to the store manager, but Mrs. Patterson had already spun her version, that I'd been inappropriate with her, that she'd had to reject my advances. She'd been there 20 years. I'd been there 3 months. They believed her. We had to shop at a different grocery store after that. I'd see her car sometimes driving slowly past our house. She'd send letters to my parents about what a troubled young man I was, how she prayed for me. She found out where I worked next and called my new boss with warnings about my character. Years later, I learned the truth from another former employee. Mrs. Patterson had done this to at least 6 teenage boys over the years. Always the same pattern: maternal figure, gradual boundary crossing, sexual advances, then character assassination when rejected. The store knew but kept her on because she was popular with customers and never quite crossed legal lines. She died 5 years ago. I found out because it made the local news. Beloved grocery store employee passes. The article talked about how she'd mentored dozens of young workers, how she was like family to everyone who knew her. The comments were full of people sharing memories of her kindness. Made me sick. I'm 31 now, married with kids of my own. I still can't shop comfortably. Friendly older women make me nervous. When elderly ladies at stores comment on my children, pat their heads, offer them candy, my whole body tenses. My wife doesn't fully understand why I'm so protective, why I won't let our teenagers get jobs in customer service. The truth is, Mrs. Patterson taught me that predators come in all forms. They're not always creepy loners or obvious threats. Sometimes they're beloved community figures who smell like cookies and have pictures of grandkids in their wallet. Sometimes they're the people everyone trusts, who've built decades of good reputation to use as a shield. She stole more than just my innocence or my first job. She stole my ability to trust kindness from older people, to accept mentorship, to believe that interest in my well-being could be genuine. She turned grocery stores into anxiety triggers and made me suspicious of every grandmotherly figure who shows too much interest in young people. The worst part is knowing she got away with it. Died a respected member of the community, probably remembered fondly by everyone except the boys she trapped in stockrooms and cars in her lonely house. Her victims scattered, silenced by disbelief, carrying our strange trauma of being preyed upon by someone who looked like she should be knitting blankets and baking pies. There's no advocacy group for teenage boys abused by elderly women. No one takes it seriously. Even now, telling this story, I imagine people minimizing it, thinking it couldn't have been that bad, that I must be exaggerating. That's exactly what she counted on. That's why she chose teenage boys old enough to feel shame, young enough to manipulate, and cursed with a story no one would quite believe. But it was real. The fear was real. The violation was real. And somewhere, in some grocery store or library or school, another Mrs. Patterson is probably selecting her next special helper, secure in the knowledge that her gray hair and cookie recipes make her untouchable. These stories remind us that predators don't follow scripts. They're not always who we expect, where we expect, or how we expect. They're the family friend who's been watching since you were born, the online mentor who speaks your language, the grandmother figure who everyone trusts. They teach us that evil hides behind familiar faces, that danger comes wrapped in kindness, and that the most effective predators are the ones who make you doubt your own instincts. They count on disbelief, on shame, on the silence that comes from stories too strange to easily tell. If you recognize yourself in these stories, know this: you're not alone. Your confusion is valid. Your trauma is real, regardless of who caused it or how unlikely it seems. Trust your instincts, even when everyone else trusts your abuser. Speak up, even when you think no one will believe you. Because somewhere, another teenager is feeling special attention turned sinister, instincts screaming while everyone else sees only kindness. And maybe your story, as hard as it is to tell, will be the warning that saves them. The exchange student's host mother. I'm 34 now, but I still can't look at Victorian houses without my chest tightening. In 2007, I was 17 and had won a scholarship to spend my senior year as an exchange student in Portland, Oregon. Coming from small-town Alabama, it felt like winning the lottery. My host family seemed perfect on paper. Mrs. Diane Fitzgerald, a widow who'd been hosting students for 10 years, living in a beautiful old house near the school. The agency called her their star host. I'd learn why she'd gotten so good at appearing perfect. Mrs. Fitzgerald was 52, elegant in that Pacific Northwest way, always in flowing cardigans and scarves, drinking tea from delicate china, listening to NPR while cooking organic meals. She had photos of former exchange students covering her mantle like trophies. My international daughters, she called them, though I noticed she'd only ever hosted girls. The first month was a dream. She took me shopping for warmer clothes, introduced me to her book club, taught me to cook Thai food. She was attentive in ways my busy parents had never been, asking about every detail of my day, remembering every classmate's name I mentioned, creating special traditions just for us. Sunday morning farmers markets. Wednesday night foreign films. She made me feel sophisticated and seen. But slowly boundaries dissolved. She'd come into my room without knocking, saying she was just bringing laundry but then sitting on my bed for hours talking. She'd run her fingers through my hair while we watched movies, saying I reminded her of her daughter who'd died. When I asked about her daughter, she'd tear up and change the subject. She started monitoring everything. She checked my phone while I slept. I'd wake to find it warm, recently used. She installed parental controls on the computer, saying the agency required it. She'd get upset if I made friends at school, saying Americans wouldn't understand me like she did. When I joined drama club, she sulked for days, saying I was choosing strangers over family. The isolation was methodical. She'd volunteer to chaperone school events, then spend the whole time pulling me away from classmates. She'd invite my friends over but make them so uncomfortable they'd never come back. She told my teachers I was homesick and fragile, needed special attention. Soon she was my only real connection in Portland. One night in November, I woke up to find her in my room, sitting in the chair by my bed, just watching me. When I gasped, she smiled sadly and said she couldn't sleep, that sometimes she just needed to make sure I was still there. She'd lost so much already, she said. She couldn't bear to lose me too. I started finding things. Long blonde hairs in my hairbrush, but mine was brown. Makeup in shades I'd never wear appearing in my bathroom. Clothes in my closet I hadn't bought. When I asked about them, she'd say she'd bought them as surprises, but they were never my size. They were her daughter's size, I realized. She was trying to transform me. The photos were the breaking point. I'd found them while looking for my passport in her study, albums and albums of former exchange students, but something was wrong with the pictures. The girls' faces had been edited, features altered to look more similar. In group photos, other people had been cut out. And in the most recent album, photos of me had already been changed. My brown hair lightened, my eyes recolored. I was being photoshopped into someone else. I confronted her and she broke down completely. Her daughter Emma had died in a car accident at 17, just before her own exchange year to France. Mrs. Fitzgerald had started hosting international students the next year, all 17-year-old girls, all planning to study in France eventually. She wasn't just hosting us. She was trying to recreate her daughter's lost future through us. She begged me not to tell the agency, said she'd never hurt me, that she just needed to pretend sometimes. She showed me Emma's room, preserved exactly as it had been, but with additions. Programs from my school plays. My homework with Emma's name written at the top. A diary in my handwriting but detailing Emma's life. She'd been practicing my handwriting, creating an alternate history where Emma lived. I called the exchange agency from school the next day. They didn't believe me at first. Mrs. Fitzgerald had hosted 23 girls successfully. But when they interviewed former students, patterns emerged. Girls who'd left early citing homesickness. Girls who'd cut contact completely after returning home. Girls who'd developed anxiety disorders, eating issues, identity problems. All of us had been slowly transformed into Emma without realizing it. The agency moved me immediately to an emergency placement. Mrs. Fitzgerald called dozens of times, left letters at school, even contacted my parents back home saying I was having a mental breakdown. She'd kept copies of my passport, social security card, birth certificate. She'd been one step away from stealing my identity completely. I finished the year with a different family but never felt safe. I'd catch glimpses of her car near school. Packages would arrive with no return address, Emma's old clothes, photos of me edited to look more like her, letters written in my handwriting about experiences I'd never had. The police said it was harassment but not enough for a restraining order. Years later, I found out what happened to some of the other girls. One had returned home to find Mrs. Fitzgerald had enrolled in language classes at her university in Germany. Another discovered credit cards opened in her name, bills sent to that Portland address. A girl from Japan got emails for years from someone claiming to be her, living her life in Portland, updating their shared friends about their American mother who missed them. Mrs. Fitzgerald still hosts exchange students. The agency banned her, but other agencies don't share blacklists. She has glowing reviews online, testimonials from girls who don't mention the slow identity theft, the midnight watching, the shrine to a dead daughter they were unknowingly recruited to resurrect. I work in international student services now, and I see the vulnerabilities everywhere. Kids far from home, dependent on strangers, eager to adapt and please. Perfect targets for someone patient enough to slowly erase who they are and rebuild them as someone else. I push for better screening, more check-ins, exit interviews that ask the right questions. But I know somewhere, another Mrs. Fitzgerald is choosing another 17-year-old girl who looks just enough like her dead daughter if you blur the photos right. She stole more than just my senior year. She stole my ability to trust maternal figures, to feel safe in temporary homes, to believe that kindness doesn't come with invisible strings. Even now, when people say I remind them of someone they lost, I feel that cold dread. Because I know how grief can twist into obsession, how a mother's love can become a prison, how someone can honor the dead by slowly killing the living. The real horror isn't that she was caught. It's that she wasn't stopped. Somewhere in Portland, in that beautiful Victorian house, another 17-year-old girl is probably having her hair lightened, her diary rewritten, her identity carefully dissolved in tea and old movies, and a ghost named Emma who refuses to stay dead. The midnight janitor. Everyone in my high school knew Mr. Chin was weird, but we thought it was harmless weird. I'm 33 now, and I still work nights because sleeping during darkness makes me feel too vulnerable. This story explains why. In 2008, I was 16 and part of my school's robotics team. We often stayed late working on projects, sometimes until 10 p.m. The school was mostly empty by then except for Mr. Chin, the night janitor. He'd been there for 15 years, a quiet man in his 50s who pushed his cart through empty hallways and never bothered anyone. That's what we thought. Mr. Chin had this thing about lights. He'd turn them off section by section as he cleaned, leaving most of the school in darkness. He said it saved electricity, and the administration loved him for cutting costs. But it meant we were often working in the only lit classroom in a dark building, like a bright island in a black sea. He started visiting our robotics room during his rounds. At first, just emptying trash and mopping. Then he'd linger watching us work. He'd ask questions about the robots in broken English, seeming genuinely interested. We were nerdy kids, any adult attention felt validating. We started explaining our projects, even letting him help with simple tasks. But I noticed things. Mr. Chen's English was inconsistent, broken when talking to adults, much clearer with us. His cleaning route changed to spend more time near our room. He'd appear suddenly in doorways, just standing there watching before we noticed him. When we'd jump, he'd smile apologetically and push his cart away. The uncomfortable moments accumulated. He'd clean the same area multiple times if we were nearby. He knew our names without being told, knew who drove which cars, knew who stayed latest. Once, I went to the bathroom and found him standing in the dark hallway outside, not cleaning, just waiting. He said he was checking if we needed anything. Then Sarah found the notebooks. She'd stayed super late one night and gone looking for Mr. Chen to let her out of the building. She found his janitor's closet open, filled with notebooks. Pages and pages of observations about students. Schedules, routes through the building, who stayed late on which days. Detailed physical descriptions. Some entries went back years. She took photos and showed us the next day. My entry was extensive times I arrived and left, which bathroom I used, my locker location, descriptions of my clothing, notes about my patterns. There were similar entries for dozens of students, but the most detailed were about kids who stayed late alone. We debated telling someone, but what would we say? That the janitor was taking notes? It was creepy but not illegal. We decided to be careful instead, always leave in groups, never stay past 9 p.m., keep our phones charged. We thought we were being smart. Everything changed during the regional competition. We'd won and came back to school late on a Friday to unload equipment. It was past 11 p.m., but we figured safety in numbers. The building was completely dark except for emergency exits. We used phone flashlights to navigate to the robotics room. Mr. Chin appeared out of nowhere in the hallway, no cart, just standing in the darkness. He said the building was closed, we needed to leave. But when we turned to go, he blocked the exit. Said he needed to check our equipment first, make sure we weren't stealing. His whole demeanor was different, authoritative, aggressive. That's when the lights went out completely. Even the emergency exits. The darkness was absolute. We heard him moving but couldn't see anything. Someone screamed. We turned on phone flashlights and he was gone, but we could hear footsteps circling us, using his knowledge of the building to move unseen. We ran. In the chaos, we got separated. I ended up with two others, racing through pitch-black hallways, Mr. Chen's footsteps echoing behind us. He knew the building perfectly. While we stumbled and hit walls, he moved smoothly, getting closer. He was hurting us, I realized, using darkness and architecture to guide us somewhere specific. We burst into the cafeteria and found 3 other teammates already there. They'd been chased too, all of us corralled to the same location. The cafeteria doors slammed shut. We heard locks clicking. He'd been installing extra locks, we realized. All those years of access, all those night shifts, preparing. Then his voice came over the intercom. Calm, clear English, no accent at all. He said he'd been waiting so long for the right group. Smart kids who stayed late, who trusted him. He'd studied us for months, chosen us specifically. Tonight was special, a celebration of our victory. We were going to play a game. The game was hide and seek in the dark. If we could avoid him until 6 a.m. when morning staff arrived, we'd win. If he caught us, he didn't finish the sentence. Then all the cafeteria doors unlocked at once and emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red. He was giving us a head start. We scattered. I ended up with my friend David, hiding in the chemistry lab. We barricaded the door and called 911, but Mr. Chin had done something to the phone lines. Our cells had no signal. He'd installed jammers, we'd learn later. We were trapped in a building with someone who'd spent 15 years learning every hiding spot, every escape route, every weakness. For 3 hours he hunted us. We'd hear him pass our hiding spot, sometimes humming, sometimes calling out observations he'd written about us. David, who always uses the second-floor bathroom. Amy, who keeps her car keys in her left pocket. Showing us how much he knew, how long he'd been watching. Around 3 a.m. we heard screaming from another floor. 2 teammates caught. We never found out what happened in those hours before help arrived. They wouldn't talk about it afterward, just shut down completely when asked. Both transferred schools within a month. The miracle came from our coach, who'd gotten worried when we didn't respond to texts. He came to school around 4 a.m. and found the building locked down in ways it shouldn't be. He called police, who found Mr. Chen's preparations, the signal jammers, the extra locks, cameras he'd installed in hidden spots. A room in the basement he'd converted into something I can't describe without shaking. Mr. Chin vanished into the maze of the building. Even with K9 units, it took police 4 hours to find him, hiding in a ventilation space he'd modified years ago. He'd been living partially in the building, they discovered. False walls, hidden spaces, caches of supplies. The school we thought we knew was honeycombed with his secrets. The investigation revealed 15 years of escalation. Started with just watching. Then following students home. Then entering empty houses while families were away. Then the notebooks, the planning, the preparation. We were meant to be his masterpiece, the project he'd been building toward. 7 smart kids who trusted him, trapped in his architectural web. He got 25 years. At the trial, he smiled at us from the defendant's table, that same apologetic janitor smile. His lawyer argued he was mentally ill, that years of night work had broken his mind. But his planning showed patience, intelligence, careful grooming. He wasn't insane. He was a predator who'd found the perfect hunting ground. I never went back to that school. None of us did. They hired security, installed panic buttons, changed all the protocols. But we knew the truth. For 15 years, every student who'd stayed late had been hunting prey. Every dark hallway had been his domain. Every harmless, weird moment had been reconnaissance. I work in tech now, always day shift. I can't be in empty buildings, can't handle unexpected darkness. When janitors appear in doorways, I flinch. When someone knows details about me they shouldn't, I panic. Because Mr. Chin taught me that the most dangerous predators are the ones everyone sees but nobody notices. The ones who patiently build their traps over years, who hide in plain sight pushing mop buckets and smiling apologetically while they memorize your every movement. Somewhere, in some other school, another night janitor is probably taking notes. Another robotics team is staying late, grateful for the friendly man who empties their trash and asks about their projects. Another group of smart kids is about to learn that the building they thought was safe has been transformed into a hunting ground, one bucket of soapy water at a time. The private tutor who understood. My parents hired Dr. Catherine Morse when I was failing AP Chemistry in 2009. I'm 32 now, teaching high school myself, and I've never told anyone the full story of what happened during those 8 months. Even thinking about it makes my skin crawl, but maybe it's time. Maybe some other teenager needs to hear this. Dr. Morse came highly recommended, a retired chemistry professor who did private tutoring for ambitious families. She was in her early 60s, sharp and professional, with sterling credentials and references from half the prominent families in our Connecticut town. My parents were thrilled when she agreed to take me on. I was their problem child, smart but unfocused, creative but disorganized, nothing like my pre-med brother. She insisted on tutoring at her house, a pristine colonial in the best part of town. Her home office was intimidating floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, certificates from Harvard and MIT, photos with Nobel laureates. She made me feel simultaneously inspired and insignificant. That was probably the point. The first few sessions were exactly what my parents paid for. She identified my learning style, created customized lessons, pushed me harder than any teacher had. My grades improved immediately, but she was interested in more than chemistry. She wanted to understand why I was failing, what was blocking my potential. She started each session with check-ins, talking about my week, my feelings, my family dynamics. She'd take notes, nodding thoughtfully, making connections between my emotional state and academic performance. She said she used a holistic approach. My parents loved that she cared about more than just grades. Gradually, the check-ins got longer, deeper. She had this way of asking questions that made you reveal more than you meant to. She learned about my parents' pressure, my brother's perfection, my secret wish to be an artist instead of a doctor. She validated every feeling, made me feel understood in ways my family never had. Then she started sharing her own story. How she'd been the black sheep in her academic family. How she'd struggled with parents who didn't understand her. How she'd found her true self only after breaking free from their expectations. She said she saw herself in me, that she could help me find my authentic path. The tutoring shifted. Less chemistry, more life coaching. She'd give me books about finding yourself, about toxic families, about cutting ties with people who held you back. She introduced meditation, saying it would help with test anxiety. But the guided meditations were strange, focused on separating from my family, visualizing a new life, imagining a mentor who truly understood me. She started texting between sessions. Inspirational quotes at first, then check-ins about my day, then longer conversations late at night. She'd say my parents were asleep anyway, that this was our time to talk freely. She'd remind me that most people couldn't understand our connection, a meeting of minds across generations. The manipulation was brilliant. When I did well on tests, she credited our special bond. When I struggled, she blamed my family's negative energy. She taught me to see every conflict at home as proof that they didn't understand me, that she was the only one who really cared about my happiness. By winter, she was my primary emotional support. I told her things I'd never told anyone, about my sexuality, my doubts about college, my anger at my parents. She received each confession like a gift, telling me how brave I was to trust her, how few people deserved such honesty. She started calling me her spiritual daughter. The boundaries eroded systematically. She'd hug me longer after emotional conversations. She'd touch my hand while making points. She'd have me lie on her couch during meditations while she sat close, sometimes stroking my hair. When I seemed uncomfortable, she'd say I was letting my repressed upbringing make me cold, that healthy people weren't afraid of affection. She introduced me to her chosen family, other young people she'd mentored who'd separated from their biological families. They'd come for dinners, all telling similar stories about finding their true selves through Dr. Morse's guidance. They seemed happy but also strange, too similar in their speech patterns, their philosophies, their devotion to her. The crisis came in March when I got accepted to art school. I hadn't even told my parents I'd applied. Dr. Morse had helped with the portfolio, the essays, even paid the application fees. She presented it as my escape route, a chance to live authentically, to leave behind everyone who'd held me back. She'd already arranged everything. I could live with one of her former students, work at a gallery she had connections with, start my real life. But she had one condition. I had to cut contact with my family completely. She said they were toxic, that they'd sabotage my dreams, that clean breaks were the only way to heal. She'd support me financially until I was established. She had legal documents prepared, emancipation papers, bank accounts in my name, even a new phone on her plan. That's when I finally saw it clearly. The chosen family wasn't free, they were collected. The former students who seemed so happy were all financially dependent on her, emotionally isolated except for her network. She wasn't freeing us from toxic families, she was creating a new family with herself as the controlling matriarch. I pretended to agree while secretly researching. Found court records of former students trying to reconnect with families after years of estrangement. Found parents posting on forums about children who'd vanished after meeting a tutor. Found a pattern spanning 20 years in 3 states. Dr. Morse moving whenever too many questions arose. I told my parents everything. The reaction was complicated, anger at her, but also at themselves for missing the signs, at me for keeping secrets. We went to the police, but grooming an 18-year-old into family estrangement wasn't illegal. The emotional manipulation, the boundary crossing, even the financial control, all technically legal. But my parents did something smart. They contacted other families whose children had worked with Dr. Morse. Together, they built a case that, while not criminal, was damaging enough to matter. They threatened civil suits, professional review boards, public exposure. Dr. Morse negotiated she'd leave the state, stop tutoring, surrender her teaching credentials. She texted me one last time before leaving. Said I'd chosen fear over freedom, that I'd regret staying trapped in my small life. That when I finally realized she'd been right, she'd be waiting. That real mothers never give up on their spiritual children. I went to regular college, studied chemistry and education, became the kind of teacher I'd needed. I watch for the signs now, the too interested mentor, the boundary erosion, the isolation tactics. I see how easy it is for lonely, misunderstood kids to fall into the web of someone who seems to see their true self. Dr. Morse is still out there. Different state, probably different name, but same tactics. Finding brilliant, struggling teenagers from wealthy families. Validating their pain. Becoming their emotional center. Offering escape that's really capture. Building her collection of spiritual children who don't realize they've traded one form of control for another. The thing that haunts me is how close I came. How ready I was to disappear into her world, to cut off everyone who actually loved me for someone who loved only my potential to be molded. How she used my real struggles with my family to create false solutions that would have trapped me forever. She taught me that predators don't always want your body. Sometimes they want your mind, your loyalty, your entire life. Sometimes they come disguised as the only person who truly understands you, offering freedom that's actually invisible chains. And sometimes the most dangerous moment is when you're 18 and legal and desperate to escape, and someone offers you exactly what you think you want. My parents and I healed slowly. I did become an artist, just not the way she planned. And every time a student stays after class to talk about family problems, I listen carefully. But I also remember Dr. Morse, and I make sure they know, the person who understands you completely might be the one who plans to keep you forever. These stories reveal a darker truth about predators. They don't always work alone, and they don't always want what we expect. Some are building kingdoms, collecting victims like trophies, creating twisted families from the lost and vulnerable. They're patient architects of manipulation, spending years perfecting their approaches, learning from each victim how to better trap the next. They hide in institutions we trust, use professional credentials as shields, exploit our deepest needs for understanding and belonging. They know that teenagers balanced on the edge of adulthood are perfect targets, old enough to make legal choices, young enough to be manipulated into making the wrong ones. If you see yourself in these stories, remember, the shame isn't yours. The careful planning, the sophisticated manipulation, the years of practice, none of that was your fault. You were targeted by experts who spent decades perfecting their hunt. Your survival, your escape, your story, these are victories. And to those still trapped in someone's carefully constructed web, know this: the door they say is locked isn't. The family they say doesn't love you probably does. The freedom they're offering is a cage with invisible bars. Real love doesn't isolate. Real mentors don't make themselves your only option. Real understanding comes with healthy boundaries, not eroded ones. There's always a way out. Always someone who will believe you. Always a life beyond the one they've planned for you. Sometimes the hardest escape is from the person who convinced you they're your only salvation.